I'm Eric Trommater, and this is World Cinema History. This week, Nosferatu, 1922, 1979, and 2024. With your panel, Eric Trommater, Yasi Soufi, Scylla Bloom, Vern Quixote, and special guest, Alicia.
Yeah, so usually when we do at least our rooms, I don't know, like because I used to host another room, the Understanding Movies, which I think maybe you came to once, Victoria.
Yeah.
We used to do like a go around. I don't know what Eric and Yasi do here because I'm never here at the beginning.
Yeah, we do the same.
Oh, I just lost you, Yasi.
No, I just want to say
Hello?
that yeah, that was our plan, but yeah, we just wanted to say right at the beginning that like mentioning that what's going on in LA, and just because they always make beautiful movies for us, we always keep them in our thoughts, and with that, I had I wanted to open with saying that we're going to talk about vampires, and vampires are of erotic and the mystics and the mysteries, and they evolved throughout all the centuries of cinema, and they're such an interesting deep psychological and philosophical tropes. And from like the societal fears to desires to anxieties, and we in 20s, like the movie that we're going to start with is Nosferatu. Like in this movie in particular, we're going to talk about like all the things that, and like when we get to the 70s, we are having like the lesbian vampires, the hammer vampires, the universal vampires. In 80s, we already talked about it before with people here, with how vampires symbolize the HIV, and like in Hunger, for instance, in uh, Tony Scott's movie with all Susan Sarandon and Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie, and we get to 90s, and here comes the all the TV series with it gets more into the pop culture with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or the bisexual and the sexy monsters. They become more sexual, and Lost Boys, and no, Lost Boys were still in the 80s, but then we get to 2000, and then here comes the like more women empowerment with Twilight, and then how teenagers lean more toward like the equal rights and agencies, and more LGBTQ, and more sexy vampires. They get more into TV, like True Blood and everything, and then all the examples of of the vampires, and from Blackula and Blade, like they go over the trope of horror. They become, uh, you know, uh, the sci-fi actions, or the the subjects for exploitation. Sometimes like they in more smaller movies, like lesser known movies, but the subject of comedy, from like Abraham Lincoln the Vampire Slayer, or the Mel Brooks movie. And then I think we have to mention that what a great year for Nicholas Hoult it was. Like, not even he was in Clint Eastwood's movie Juror Number Two, that I forgot to mention on last week's episode. But he was also in a vampire movie with Nicolas Cage, Rainfield, comedy horror. And then the return of Salem's Lot, is Stephen King's book. And sometimes like the vampires are they're more allegorical, like the addiction of Abel Ferrara with Christopher Walken and Lily Taylor, or come on, help me here. Come on, people. Whatever vampire movies that you remember, like Shadow of a Vampire, or the Frank Langella with Laurence Olivier as Van Helsing, the King of Vampires, or uh, come on, whatever vampire movies that you remember. come on, chime in. Or I don't know, the
Christopher
Resident
Lee
Evil.
Hammer,
Oh
the
yeah,
the
I
lesbian.
said the Hammer movies. Yeah,
Oh
the
well,
lesbians
I'm
I
sorry.
mentioned. Yeah.
Did
Okay,
you mention
and
lesbian? Did you mention lesbian vampires?
I did in
Oh
'70s,
wow, I missed it.
and most importantly, they even entered the Western genre, from Dusk Till Dawn, the Queen of the Damned, very very allegorically in Ed Wood. Dead Man, Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man. Again, they become like the tropes for the video games, Resident Evil, Underground. Oh, and it's totally different. Like they go in totally different. Like I Am Legend. That's also the story of vampire, and Interview with the Vampire. Oh, here comes Anne Rice with her sort of, all those vampires, and the thing is, this monster has this ability to, just because it's a fictional character, the rules, they're not the permanent. The rules can change. Some can walk in the light, the rules can change, so it's a very flexible monster.
Okay, so I'm starting to get anxiety because I used to prep for rooms and I didn't prep for this room, and so I only thought we were going to list off the three.
No, 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 that's
So
what
now
we're
I'm
doing.
starting to
I
feel
just
I
That was
didn't.
just
I got it.
the
Calm down,
introduction.
settle
No,
down,
no, 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 that
settle
was just the
I
down,
didn't
settle
prep for
introduction.
down.
this room either, and I'm running it. So there we go.
Yes,
No, that was just
calm
the
down, Yasi.
introduction. I was just gonna say like
Gotcha.
this, and then here comes Nosferatu, that is like has its own place in the genre as like a not Count Dracula or a vampire, but he is Count Orloff. And we're gonna talk about the three of the, like a few more, because just I mentioned Nicholas Holt being in a different vampire movie, or Willem Dafoe, but also Klaus Kinski is in the Nosferatu in Venice that we're not going to talk about here. But yeah, we're gonna talk about the three vampire movies from Nosferatu movies from 2279 and 2024. So I'm gonna like
Thanks, Jesse.
who?
Oh,
Oh,
go
okay,
ahead.
go ahead. No, no,
I
no.
wanted to do my.
I thought you were
I just
gone.
wanted to do my. I just wanted to do my little consumer warning. This is being recorded for replays and also for our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. So if you do not want to appear on the podcast, we're going to be starting in about 2 minutes. And yeah, so nothing you put in the comments will be in the podcast. So you can say what you want in the comments without having to worry. But if anything you don't want to be in the podcast, don't say while on stage. Fair warning, fair dues. Everybody understands. And by being in the room and speaking, you consent to be on the podcast.
So henceforward, I will be calling you Alicia and not Victoria. Victoria.
That's okay.
And I will say, I tend to trauma dump when we talk about movies, and there's going to be a lot of trauma dumping for this because now I know why I don't like to watch horror movies because it just triggers so much stuff from my childhood. And this is going to be like a therapy session for me. So brace yourselves, folks. Buckle up.
Okay, as long as we keep it under 4 hours.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
If we have to come
Now
back
that's
for a
some horror
second
for you
room,
right there.
Sheila will do a second room, but I don't want an editing nightmare.
Okay, so here we go. So who's okay? Sela, you watch the
Wait,
three.
I need to do an
The
intro and then we'll do the once around
Oh
because
my
I
goodness,
gotta,
I went like on a long rant. That wasn't
which
the
is
intro.
great. I can't wait to hear it, Yazzie, and it's gonna be in the podcast. Don't worry. There's this magic thing. I don't know if you heard. You can edit audio now. I don't know if you heard about this.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. Let's go, because I'm getting tired.
Okay.
I'm old and I'm
All
getting
right,
tired.
start the intro. 1, 2, 3. All right. Hello and welcome to World Cinema History. This week, Nosferatu, 1922, 1979, and the current film out in theaters from Robert Eggers this year, which is, if you're listening in the future, 2024. We have a panel today consisting of Yasi Soufi, Sela Bloom, Werner, who he goes by Quixote, and a friend of the podcast we'll just call Alicia. Uh, I'm gonna just
Alicia,
give my
please.
Alicia.
Alicia.
My apologies. My
Gracias,
apologies.
amigo. No problem.
And friend of the podcast we'll just call Alicia. Uh, with that, I'm just going to give my brief overview of the current film in theaters. Which, if I were a 14-year-old boy, this would be my favorite movie. I consider it to be rather the Star Wars of vampire films in that way. I don't mean that as a criticism, but I just want to kind of put that out there. And speaking of Star Wars, hey, Yazzie, I beat you to it. I made the first Star Wars reference. And I'm going to turn it over to my co host, Yazzie Sophie, for her thoughts.
Okay.
Then I edit your.
Okay, no,
Here is where I'll edit
I'm gonna pass it to
your intro.
Sila. I'm gonna pass it to Sila, but then I'm gonna like later I'm gonna talk about like why do I think that it's a very 2024 Nosferatu movie, and why do like I could find a lot of Star Wars in it, not just yeah. So go ahead, Sila.
I will just say a couple of things general about my impression as a trio, which is kind of difficult for me because I have mixed a couple of content aspects by watching all of them within a week. But I'm sure you know enough about it to be able to help me when I start talking about the wrong movie. Anyway, I find very interesting, which I don't think is really possible to plan, obviously, how the three movies kind of remind me of three different periods. The na- Alicia, can you please close your mic? Thank you. We start with 22, which I find not so much about the time of the film, but about the time of the globe, the the beginning of this type of imagery, which reminds me a lot of. Uh,
See, let's tap your mic again.
oh, I'm sorry. So the 1922 reminds me of the a very simplistic but very artistic way of dealing with vision or playfulness when you think of a this this cut out silhouettes, these constructions of paper that fold three dimensional. When you think of books that you can flip with your thumb, and this this artistry of how you create something moving and something great and a story out of such a simplistic way of working with things. I I like very much how this comes out in this film. Then we go to 1979, which, as Yasi alluded to, we're dealing with a certain dynamic and spirit pretty much around the globe. And the 60s, 70s, which is a very powerful development for music, for theater, and I like very much how this film is, in my observation, displaying very much how we are, the language used in the film, how we are in those in that period of dynamic art, music, and everything, theater. Then 2024 to me speaks very much about the weird times we live in. It is, of course, is the only one I saw at the theater. I saw it yesterday in Barcelona, and I am assuming this was intentional. The film, everything is too loud. You hear too many sound effects that are not just not really out of place, but they're too much. Everything is too loud. The music is too loud. The the sounds of the mouth are too loud. Everything is just typical 2024. It's too much. And I find the film also, I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings. I find the film is a little bit too exaggerated, not only in terms of technology, in terms of the way they play the roles, but also the way the darkness that I see of um, Count Orlok or Nosferatu. Very, very dark. There are too many intertwined impressions for me in this 2024. And I'll conclude by saying, for me, the in most aspects, as a film, generally speaking, the Herzog with Klaus Kinski is actually phenomenal. I love Kinski in that role. We know, at least in Germany and in Europe, we know a lot about Kinski, about his problems, about his problems with people. But in this film, he is amazing at hiding that for the sake of the tension of the spirit and the innocence of this character, even though we are all afraid of it. But I just think it's a very, very good movie.
Thank you,
Hi,
Selah. And I'd like to
Daniel.
point. I'd like to welcome Daniel Kiekhefer to the stage. Daniel, we're going to have you back cleanup because you were here last. So you get the you'll get the final opening remarks. We're going to move
Sure.
on to
No, no, no.
we're
We're
going to
gonna
move
jump
on
from
to
Vern because Vern is going to use this as as therapy. So we go to
I was
Alicia.
just
Yeah.
saying we're going to move on to Alicia so that Vern can have a chance to trauma dump. Like, we're going to move on to Vern as soon as we get Alicia's opening remarks, so Vern can have a chance to trauma dump, and Daniel can give him some therapy. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes. So very good, very good. So Alicia, your opening remarks on well, first of all, which of the films have you seen, and your impressions of the three?
Okay, so hi everybody. Just so you know, I'm a literature professor, so I've not only read the Gothic novels of the 19th century, including Dracula by Stoker, upon which this, these Nosferatu films and Dracula films are ultimately based, but I feel a little odd because it's my first time here. I feel a little odd going in front of people who have been here. I haven't seen the Herzog in its entirety recently. I've seen the Murnau a couple of times, and I just watched it again this morning. And I saw the 2024 with Vern yesterday, actually. So I liked Yasi. Thank you for that exhaustive introduction. And it's amazing how exhaustive, right? The myth of the vampire Nosferatu has been since novelized by Stoker in 1897, I think. Um, And I think in terms of the films, whole idea of the plague and the way the films either are emphasizing the plague through a focus on, a kind of sly focus on women's sexuality, as somehow connected to bringing the plague. I find that in the Murnau in a much more innocent and like I'm sorry, excuse me, like Sela was saying, a sort of almost innocent, representation of sexual mores. Certainly in the 2024 version, the wife of Hutter comes to be known as Harker in the Dracula versions, um, is the seems to be it seems to be her, uh, her erotic and spiritual sensibilities that invite the Nosferatu. And so I think the way in which the plague is sort of, um to whatever degree it's tied in, in these movies, I find that very interesting. Um yeah, that's what I've got.
Thank you, Alicia. We'll have a lot to say about rats, especially in the 1979 Werner Herzog version. Vern, our good friend Vern. First of all,
No, Daniel.
welcome back. Well, welcome back. You were a great you did a great job last week. No, we're gonna do Vern. Then Daniel is going to back cleanup. Um, this is not a democracy. Anyway, Vern, your opening thoughts. We'll get into your trauma dump later in the episode. No worries, but just your opening thoughts on the three versions of the Nosferatu.
My good fellow, every time I open up my mouth during this session, it's going to be a trauma dump. So I will give a brief one. So number one, when I watched the film with Alicia and my 15-year-old daughter in the theater, um, my my first impressions were my first and final impressions because the film is kind of bookended with this kind of rape. Like I think in the first one, she's a young girl and I guess she conjures the demon and then she has all these kind of orgasmic expressions. And then, of course, at the end of the film, they consummate their relationship actually physically. So it was a little chilling for me to sit in a movie theater, two seats from my 15-year-old daughter, constantly checking, to see whether this was too much for her. But she had heard some reviews of the film, and she said that, it sounded like a good film, and like she doesn't just say that. And then the other thing is when we finished watching it, she said that she enjoyed it. And then we watched the 1922 Murnau today. She fell asleep midway through, and I almost did. But I thought the contrast between the two films, um, I was a bit surprised because one, I've kind of avoided watching the 1922 version because that poster has creeped me out since I was an infant, and I really, as a result, I kind of don't like horror films, and so I was a little bit surprised by how kind of sedate it was, especially compared to the 2024 version. So I'm going to leave it there, but I did have a lot to say about the plague and anxiety. I thought there were some interesting things, given that this was from 1922 when there was a plague, smallpox, and that, now we're 2 years from our COVID plague. So there are some things about that. And then as the father of two daughters, whenever I watch films, I like to think about patriarchy and the subjugation of women. And so that was certainly forefront in the 2024 version. And I was surprised by how sedate it was. I thought there would be more of it, especially given that we watched The Last Laugh yesterday, another Murnau film in which, women. I don't think any women had jobs in that film, and so that this was 2 years before that when there's a lot of contrast in just his directorial style because it did definitely feel like a very different film. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to unpack all these boxes, and I'll let Daniel get his opening remarks. And I see El Normo was here and Victor, so you guys are welcome to come up if you want. Go ahead, Daniel.
Hi, everyone.
Hang on before you go, Daniel. Alicia, please keep your microphone muted while Daniel's speaking, so we don't pick up background noise.
My microphone has been muted since I stopped talking.
Oh, interesting. I don't. Okay, it's a glitch on our end. My apologies.
No worries.
Sorry about that. I want to introduce Daniel Kiekhefer, who has authored a book on cinema and also runs along with Vern, the Understanding Movies room here on Clubhouse. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, hi everyone. I've always been a big fan of the Murnau and Herzog versions of this film, but although I have not caught up with the Eggers so far, my parents took me to a double feature of the two back in probably 1981 or so, when I was around 11 years old, and saw them back to back. And the silent one terrified me as a kid, but that didn't um, deter me from watching horror films as it did Vern, apparently. But it made an impression. The where should I start? The difference between the two films, I always go back and forth which one I like more, the Murnau or Herzog. The nice thing about the Herzog is that, as I think Sela indicated, it humanizes the vampire, makes the vampire into a kind of lonely character, which is a far cry from what Murnau is doing with making him sort of insect-like, right? But there is something to be said for Murnau's version too. It 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 comes along in about what in 4 years after World War I ends, and this whole idea of a young man being sent overseas as Hutter is sent to Transylvania is it's vaguely like the idea of German soldiers sent off to war and they come back with um, not the plague of a vampire, but with their own scars. And so the film resonates with immediate history in that way. I had a student who wrote a nice paper midterm on the film this last semester, and she was comparing she was looking at the homosexual uh, component of the vampire replacing Lucy in Hutter's life to some degree, and Murnau, of course, was gay himself and would have had reason to do that. I can't remember the argument too clearly right now, although I did save the paper. What else can I say? I've never done proper analysis of either film, and so I'm only giving you really kind of loose impressions, but they're both beautiful in their own ways. I'm kind of skeptical of Eggers because the films I've seen so far, The Witch didn't impress me, and The Lighthouse struck me as being more of a visual tour de force than anything else. My father is a historian of witchcraft, no less, and he went out to see The Witch and was very disparaging of its historical accuracy. Apparently, people praise Eggers for his his attention to historical detail, but my father certainly is not on their side. So I don't know what else I want to add to this. Neither the Murnau nor Herzog was filmed in Transylvania properly, so I don't count that against either film. But having been to Transylvania twice myself, it would be neat to see a version that was actually filmed in Transylvania. Did anyone know if Eggers actually went there to Romania?
He did not.
He
He
did
did.
not. So
It's filmed
nope.
like mostly like in Norway. Transylvania doesn't like to give a lot of permits to vampire films for obvious reasons.
Sander.
Our special guest star.
Sorry, that's Ara. 1 second.
Oh, she's getting
Hi,
older.
Ara.
Hello.
Oh yeah. She wants me to carry her. Ara, I'm on the phone, okay? I forgot to lock the door. Sorry, guys. You can go on with the discussion.
Thanks, Daniel. And if Daniel's children aren't in the background, is he actually on our episode? Really? I remember one episode where he wasn't. It didn't feel right. You know. We're gonna move on to particular subjects, and our first one that Yazzie and I had some notes we wanted to get through before we got into kind of an open free for all here. Was comparing mostly because we want to get to the Edgar's version a little more towards the end because we don't want to have any spoilers, but. The first one in comparing the 22 version to the 79 version that I noted and Yazzie agreed with me is that Herzog was able to inject quite a lot of humor, especially visual humor, into the 79 version that wasn't in the Murnau version. And I'm just going to give like a couple of examples, but there are literally hundreds of, I would almost say belly laughs in the 79 version, which is rather weird given its reputation as being as being kind of a dour film and slow moving, as people call it. But for instance, when and now he's called Jonathan Harker is at the inn and he announces that he's going to go visit Orlok's castle. You get that kind of you have the same scene in both the 22 and the 79, the kind of record scratch moment where everybody turns their head and uh, Herzog cuts to a goose, turning his head as well. Or Orlok is the long nails, and he's got these repeated little comic set pieces, almost Chaplin-esque. The one that comes to mind is when he's got the wine stopper, and his long nails can't get the wine stopper onto the bottle. And but there are hundreds of these little moments here, and yet I find the 79 version to be truly scarier than than the 1922 version, simply because it's the performances are able to be a lot more subdued, because with pantomime, of course, you have to emote so much. And what Kinski does so brilliantly, and what makes the funny moments even funnier, is he moves so very, very little. And when he does move, it actually means a lot. And it makes the comic moments even better because they are just so dead faced. Because he is just so dead faced. It is, so I said Charlie Chaplin, but I would actually say more Buster Keaton type of comedy. But I'm gonna kind of open up and do a once around and what did you all think in terms of the 79 version about the Herzog's use of humor, and we'll start again, reverse PTR order. Uh, El Normo, uh, the Normster, Norman Green, or his Royal Normness, if you're not into the old brevity thing, has joined us. Norm, what did you think of the use of humor? We'll
Sorry, I want to listen, but I can't speak. I'm in the gym.
we'll get back to we'll get back to Norm when he's done with his exercise. Alicia, what did you think of the use of humor?
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Great. So I did not get to see more than the first 30 minutes of the Herzog. So I can't really respond to your question about humor. But I mean, I do remember because I saw the Herzog years ago. I mean, there is certainly room, and it comes up in the Hollywood films of Frankenstein as well, right? The other Gothic, novel from the 19th century. There's certainly room for humor because for a variety of filmic reasons, I would imagine. But I can't speak directly to your question in the Herzog, so I'm gonna move it along to whoever can.
I have a question. Like, I think we have to mention Roland Topper's role as Renfield's, and how important he is with his like that iconic laughter, uh and why he was casted in this movie. And then I think Sila can tell us like more about the, the duo of Kinski and Herzog, and how much like dark humor is on the scene and behind the scene.
So I'm a little bit a loss for words with the humor, not because I didn't see any. I believe either in the towards the end of the Eggers film or at the end of the Herzog film. I recall that I found it a little bit funny, but I don't I really don't perceive much humor. Not because there's none, because just because I just don't. That's not that's not how it vibrates with me. And in terms of the laughter of both of them, uh, which are quite different, to me that I do not connect that with humor. For me, it's just this very diabolic, submissive weirdness of these two characters in the two films, which happens to be, they express it through this laugh. But for me, that's just a way to first scare people, and another one to show my devotion to whatever I am striving for, or whichever my master is. I did not see that as anything to make me laugh.
Well, thank you, Sela. We're going to move to Daniel Kiekhefer, and then we're going to let Vern back clean up on this subject. Daniel, did you notice what I noticed, that there was almost like a wink at the camera throughout the Herzog version?
Yeah, more than that. But you know what? The movie's not very fresh in my mind. I've been racking my brain ever since you asked the question, trying to think what the really funny moments were. And I remember that they were there, but I can't tell you, I can't single them out. Sorry.
Well,
Maybe they'll occur to me later.
even the difference in the ending, where she sprinkles the communion wafer
Yes,
Oh,
around
yes,
yes,
Jonathan,
yes.
yes.
The way
That
he
that
jumps
is
over
that is true.
he jumped over the the host, the crumbs. He jumps over the crumbs, right?
he has the maid clean him up. Clean this mess up so that he can go
Yeah,
free.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
And the whole bumbling bit about, well, all of the police are dead from the plague. Will you arrest him? I can't arrest him. I don't know how to arrest people. I don't arrest people. That's not
Correct,
my the
correct.
book.
I
All of
don't have
that.
a gun.
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't have an sidearm. I can't arrest him without sidearm. Yeah, all of that. Yeah.
yeah. There's not as much humor in the Murnau, but the character of Nock is so well played. Alexander Granach is the actor who plays. He's a favorite of mine. He's also the lead and one of the important characters in Morning Shadows, which I love. He plays Nock. He hems it up, but he's got such an energy to him. Very funny.
And he
Just
just has a funny face. And the knock, they just cast him, I think, almost for his face. Like, just his face is funny. So yes, I
Yeah.
agree. Vern, you're batting cleanup on this subject, and then we're gonna move on to Yazi's favorite subject.
Right. So I'm about to say something that is going to raise, I think, Yassi's hackles and maybe yours as well. So my funny bone is completely broken. And like I've been watching Saturday Night Live for I think 40 years or ever since it started, and I think I may have laughed at like two two skits in that. And so when I watch Herzog movies, I I don't see the humor. They just seem kind of corny to me. So I'm actually, and that's the one version I haven't watched. So I'm going to be listening to what you guys say to make the case for me to go and actually watch the Herzog version. So I haven't seen it, and whether I see it or not is going to depend on how you guys close out this room. However, I did want to say before we hand off to Yasi, um, we had been texting a little bit back and forth, and somehow uh, I had been making some noise about Nietzsche and his the sense of repulsion and nausea. And then she said she was going to send me like a little short essay. And then she sent me like, I don't know, 500 pages of Julia Krestiva's Powers of Horror, an essay on abjection, in which the translator's note were about the length of the small introduction. So I really want her to kind of see if she can find a way to apply the powers of horror to her analysis of this so I can understand why I'm reading it.
Yasi,
And
that's one of the best
Oh.
Christevas.
No, that's like the go to. That's the go to. It's like, but Vern, you got it wrong. Like that's the corny and the cheesy thing that you find is exactly what you're supposed to laugh at. That's the whole point. That's what like you know, if it's supposed to make you scared, like it can make you laugh. That's the same thing. This is that's the whole joy of watching horror movies and Z movies and horror movies, you know, B movies, because they allow you to laugh at them without like having this sort of feeling that, oh, I don't know why, like I'm afraid. And no, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. That's the human reaction towards the cat, what you're watching on the screen.
I think I've had so much trauma in my life that cinematic horror just makes me sleepy. Sorry.
No, it has nothing to do with the horror. No, I mean, I said if you find, why do you, what do you do towards something that you find cheesy? You just say, "Oh, cheesy," or no, you laugh at it. That's what it is. I think that's the awkward and the, you know, that value of uncanny and all the, that's the irony. What makes you laugh is the contrast of this is supposed to be scary, and look at like everyone's laughing, or look at that being funny instead of making me laugh. That's the human reaction, and I think that's the whole, you know, that's exactly what Herzog was aiming for. You know, the irony of this, the absurdity of this, that's supposed to make you laugh. And when you laugh, you kind of connect with it emotionally. Why do you think like if something is ridiculous, you don't connect to it? Oh, exactly, you do.
Okay, moving on to our next subject. I just have written down Yazzie does her thing about feminism and the male gaze. And so that I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Yazzie Sophie. Do your thing.
Oh no, I'm not gonna go like on that rant, but I think it's we can talk about so many things, like from the we can compare them, these two, like visually, or from the statics point of view, or like what, how like what's the difference between these two count orlogs, why, like which one looks like you know, an insect, a Kafkaesque kind of insect, why the other one is in this kind of he does not lean into his monstrous nature, and he feels this alienation and an anxiety, but you know, because in the, you know, we expect like uh is it like subverting what we expect from the count orlok, or no, is that like the what do you think? I think we can like talk about all those things. You can go over like the, you know,
Okay,
or
well
there is a something,
let's stick
you
to
know,
my topic here for a
one thing
moment
I
though.
want to
Okay, go
ask,
ahead.
like why like
Because
you know,
I actually would like to explore that a little.
yeah, of course, you know, because Expressionism is like they are based on the ideas of Nietzsche. And which one, like the very, very early group of them that like started like the bridge. Sila, help me. Die Brücke. Die Brücke. Yeah, the bridge. Like they
Yes,
like
yes.
yeah, okay, oh good. Kirchner and Rotloff, they were like before the Blue Riders, they were thinking that we are the bridge between the past and the future. So if we want to look at this like as Nosferatu as being like this uh the the Murnau's version, as this timeless movie that uh, impact on not just the horror genre, but so many other movies, so many other filmmakers, so many other genres become this zeitgeist. So, and at that point in 1979, Herzog decided to change everything, like to create this new type of cinema for Germany. Okay, so it was he also the bridge? Could he deliver? Is that the Nosferatu? Is that the monster that you expect to see in 1979?
Well, Herzog thought of
Well,
himself
it's too
as,
bad Norm left because go ahead.
sorry, as reconnecting to Germany's cinematic past. When the critic Lotte Eisner was sick in Paris, dying, he got the news that she was on her deathbed, and he decided that if he walked from Munich to Paris, that she would be alive when he arrived there. And sure enough, she was, and she lived another 9 years. And for him, she was the bridge, the link between Germany's present and its past. She had known the expressionist director. She had been writing since the 1920s and knew Lang and Murnau and Pabst and all those important figures from the 20s. And Herzog felt that German cinema from the Nazi period on was a wasteland, that there was nothing of much value there. And he wanted to recapture. So you could see in Heart of Glass the whole idea of resurrecting a lost secret is there in Herzog's work. And with this vampire movie, he wanted to apparently to recapture the magic of the expressionists.
Which I think he does quite well.
Oh yeah.
But I am gonna get back. I am gonna get back to my notes. Um, let's talk then instead about the three
Let's see
female
if
leads.
someone else, like, I know Alicia, Vern just said he has something to like say about this. Come on, like Sila, what do you think? Alicia, what do you think? Vern, what do you?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to like, I don't know, you flustered about the female gaze, but like,
Oh,
it's a
for that.
vampire
Oh,
movie.
okay, we get back to
Right.
that. So, anyone wants to like say if do you find Nietzsche in uh, Herzog version?
I
All
don't
right,
want to.
Yasi, you brought up Nietzsche. I'm calling the police right now.
Just a very short note on the humor aspect. I have always said that humor does not really necessarily make you laugh and does not need to just because it's humor. But that's just my perspective. What I find interesting in the Herzog film is how, and obviously there are some historians in the room right now, or kids of historians, but I found that there was a few things that come together in the 79, the Herzog. Rheingold, which is the Wagner piece that we hear twice, was composed. Uh, I composed. I'm not sure, but it was premiered around the 1870, 1869, I think. And the the point at which Jonathan Harker goes to visit Nosferatu is 1850. The topic of enlightenment also comes up by Dr. von Helsing, and which is more or less the time that we're dealing with here, towards the end of the Enlightenment period. So I found that very interesting that the moment in which he's approaching the castle, you see what reminds me very much of Caspar Friedrich, Caspar David Friedrich, which
Yeah,
it's very,
the enigma of Caspar Hauser.
yeah. Well, no, no, I'm talking about the painter who did very similar paintings. Just they had more color, but it was the same feel of this when he's sitting up there contemplating, and he has just left the Roma, the Sinti Roma, and he's approaching and he's admiring this beauty, and we hear Rheingold, which is actually a well, it's referring to gold. So I found that very interesting how different facts of history were put together by him in this film.
Oh,
Vernon,
I
your
told
thoughts.
Eric the same.
Go ahead, Yasi, then Vern.
No, that's it. I was
No,
just gonna say. I said that I told you the same thing. That how much each of these movies remind me of a painting. Yeah, totally.
Can I tell a quick story that is off topic but is in the spirit of these movies? Yasi
I'd
mentioned.
be disappointed if you didn't.
Okay, thank you. Yasi mentioned the Enigma of Caspar Hauser. On New Year's Eve, 2009, my father was visiting me in Germany. We went on a trip to Bavaria, and we were in Ansbach that night. And we visited a cemetery. For some reason, he wanted to see the Gothic chapel there. And in the cemetery, we were directed by some signs to a grave of none other than Caspar Hauser. And we went there and we met an old woman right by the grave of Caspar Hauser, who turned out to be the widow of the gravedigger. And she was telling us all kinds of stories about the cemetery. It was a full moon that night, if I remember correctly, and it was kind of a spooky experience. The gravedigger, Caspar Hauser, the cemetery, the full moon, everything just come together. And that's it. But yeah, that's my Caspar Hauser story. Not really a story, but
Uh, for our American listeners, that film is called "Here, Every Man for Himself and God Against All." Just
that's right.
But don't you think, like, okay, I have so don't you think that how interesting it is that the 22 Nosferatu, there's this uh, uh, take on it that this that the monster is kind of represents the war and the fear and the angst of the war, and also, as Vern mentioned, the plague and the atmosphere, and also Sila mentioned that the thing that each of these uh Nosferatus, each of these vampires, each of these monsters present, and each, like, the this in Herzog version, this kind of, he said that the German movies at the time, he wanted to be a father for the new generation because he thought that the German cinema was lost, and he did not like the Fassbender and the movies that were made at the time, And I think, Eric, you can talk about that more. But at that era in 70s in German cinema, but he, so he decided to go back to the roots, to where, like, the great era of, as Daniel, you said, like, to the great era of German cinemas, kind of revive those expressionist ideas, philosophies, and aesthetics. So, but his take, what I really like about that Nosferatu is that he, he uh a monster after the second war, and he's carrying all the trauma and of the past, of I think this contrast of someone wanting to uh, create something for the future, but finds do not go for the power, the bestial nature of this monster. He does not look at him as powerful. He's a monster who is having like psychological struggles. He wants to lean more into his human side. He wants death. He thinks that it's a curse. It's not power to be immortal. I think that is so interesting, this uh mixture, a very existential, more kind of realism, like, because that's what Herzog always does. He makes everything seems like a documentary, so bringing that archetype, bringing that myth, and turn it into this uh monster who with all these the traumas and what do you think about that? What do you think about uh, this Nosferatu in Herzog movie?
We'll start with Vern. You can either answer the question or move on. It's up to you.
Yeah, I didn't see the Herzog version, so I can't really say. But I'm waiting for us to loop back around to the feminist, and then actually Alicia, when we watched it, she had a really interesting observation that I would like to key in. But I'm gonna let y'all finish this piece, and then we'll move on when we're ready.
Daniel,
Yeah, what exactly is the question again? I'm sorry.
the difference between the Nosferatu and in the first and the second, between Kinski and Shrek,
Yeah, I mean, I summed
and
it
what
up.
it says about what it says about the time.
Yeah. Sorry, I caught that, but I just, I lost the thread a little bit. I described it as the difference between one is an insect-like monster, and the other one is a there's a loneliness of the vampire that Ginsky portrays that humanizes
Do you think there was a Jewish stereotype to Shrek's performance? I felt it.
him. I mean, I see where people are coming from when they talk about that. I don't know. I guess it may be there, and if so, it's a mark against the movie. Whether it's intentional or not, it's very hard to say for me. Don't know.
Alicia, historically, yes, the difference is how Nosferatu is transformed. You had the luxury of seeing all three versions. I know you don't have the Herzog quite as good in your memory, but what does it say about our times, the changes that have gone through in 2,000 words or less? I'm joking.
I'll try to keep it short. Our times, huh? It's interesting to me. The 1922 version is 100 years ago, right? It's one of the first films. I mean, when does cinema begin? 1915, Birth of a Nation. Is that right, Vern? So I thought that the different versions are of course shaped by their particular cultural and social world connections and historical the way in which history shapes those interpretations. The first version, the Murnau, um, is made without the permission of the Stoker estate, and that's part of the reason why it's like ripped from. They attempt to rip it from history. I'm glad that it wasn't pure wholly successful, and I think that this is a really interesting idea. Herzog's Nosferatu as tortured, the tortured soul vampire, which we get to some degree, I think, in the one that Gary Oldman plays, in which Gary Oldman plays Dracula, which is set in London, more based on the Stoker novel than on the German tradition. And of course, so I like the idea of the Herzog version, which is, you know, the tortured, because that there is that exists in the novel as well, and is connected to the torture of enlightenment, right? Because when you have enlightenment, you also, the flip side of enlightenment, which people always forget about, is inquisition. Right? The flip side of enlightenment is the not so is the things that are, you know, sort of unleashed with all of the wonderful things that enlightenment can bring, right? And so I think that the Herzog representation is very interesting. I also thought that it was somewhat present in the one that Vern and I saw yesterday, because that that Nosferatu, rather, that monster actually almost looks more human, right? I mean, it's pretty horrendous for, you know, then, you know, it's interesting because it kind of refers for me back to the 22 version, the Murnau version, where what was the guy's name? It literally means fright in German, Shrek.
Max Shrike.
Yeah, yeah,
Max Shrek.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, and so it you know, I thought, oh yeah, okay, I see you, but I think it also is connected to, you know, in addition to what I had said earlier about my interest in the plague, and how no matter which plague you're facing, whether it's the 19th century or you know, the fear of the plague of, you know, a kind of inching toward feminine agency, to the early 20th century with the Spanish flu and smallpox, to, you know, to what we've got now and what happened in the film, the Eggers version, where sexuality is, I mean, Vern, for the record, you did chuckle in a couple of scenes, and it was, those were scenes that were connected to a hypersexualized representation of what I can't remember her name, the primary character, the woman, the
Lily
wife,
Rose Depp.
Lily Rose, right,
The
Ellen,
the
right.
actress.
Ellen in the film.
Ellen in the film, of what, you know, what she's experiencing, and the way in which that experience kind of draws this Eastern other, you know, you guys mentioned a kind of Jewish you know, an ethnicized Jewish representation, but certainly that exists, you know, so in the novel as well. So these binaries are all being troped out in each film. And you know, it was funny, Yasi, when you gave your presentation early when we first started, I was listening to you and I thought, damn, I think I've seen almost every one of those, with the exception of the ones that are more video game like. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that what
It was a
we're being,
great answer.
is it, because I just I feel like
Well, because
I'm still like
you brought
gathering
up the Spanish,
thoughts.
you brought up the Spanish, you brought up the Spanish flu epidemic, and Eggers, of course, is making this post COVID. One
Yeah.
of the flaws I think in the
Yeah.
Eggers version is he never brings it home. Where and I think it's ironic because, of course, now we know the stories about animal cruelties to rats. I lived on Staten Island for a year. I There's no such, you cannot be too cruel to a rat as far as I'm concerned. But
That's funny.
the Herzog version, the idea of a plague is just very omnipresent, and it's very interesting
Hmm.
that coming after COVID, for the Eggers version, and coming after the Spanish flu epidemic for the Murnau version. None of that idea of the shadow of the vampire descending on a town and bringing the plague
Yeah.
comes from Bram Stoker. That's all rooted in that original.
In the original
Um,
Nosferatu myth. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Could I say one
and
thing to you about the comedy, though? can I just make one comment? I forgot about the comedy.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
Yeah, Herzog has such a great time. I don't know if you guys remember the one scene that I remember is when Harker gets to the castle after the grand, enlightenment moment, right? And he gets there and he has, the count greets him and is hosting him. And remember when he cuts his hand and the count leaps upon him, you know, to
Oh,
suck the
the
blood.
slow motion, the almost slow motion chase scene, like
Right,
Keystone Cop.
exactly, exactly. That scene, and then he falls into his chair, right? And the count says, "Let's sit for a while." That was
Well,
funny.
and the
That was
way
fun.
the line delivery is perfect. Not unfortunately not in the English version. It's only in the German version that you get the line delivery. Like he's worn himself out, trying, and the way he films it, he almost looks like he's going down on the on Harker's finger. Speaking of
Oh, I have to
sexualization.
watch that again. Okay, but I did remember that in terms of comedy. Sorry to interrupt you.
Well, and just before that, when he tries to get a carriage and he talks to the carriage guy who's brushing a horse, explaining, there are no horses here. Do you see any horses here? I mean, it's just filled with wonderful.
That's
And
true.
then uh,
Yeah.
Vernon.
So I think some of the chuckles that emanated from me in the theater, they were like chuckles of discomfort, like, oh my God, I can't believe Lucy is watching this. But I think
I knew you were going to say that.
there were some parts where I was like, oh my God, we're in exorcism country here. And that's the interesting thing about the Murnau version is I was expecting that there would be like an exorcist. I thought that the Defoe character would have been in this film, and that's not there at all. So I was surprised because it shows up so much in like I guess the Van Helsing when they come for Dracula, and that's what I was expecting at the end. Is that the men would come to save the day, and so I was surprised by the ending, and I had never seen the 1922 version, so I didn't know that that's how it actually ends. And so I thought it was brilliant that that Ellen takes control, not only of her own destiny and her husband, but she
Yes.
kind of sacrifices herself,
Yes.
and I think when I was watching this one, like we watched a lot of the Harry Potter films, and we read them when the children were much smaller. And there's this sense when you're reading or watching Harry Potter, or when you're watching or reading the Lord of the films, there is this sense of like annihilation, like imminent annihilation. And it's like during the first Trump administration, and now certainly going into his second one, there's this sense that there's evil crossing the land, like that hand, like in Edgar's film, and I feel like, and then there's the plague, of course, like that's part of it. And then there's just this, like Nosferatu, he's trying to seduce this young, well, girl and then woman. So there's that. And then there's just this sense of evil in the world. But the thing I wanted to get back that Alicia mentioned to me when we watched the film is, we were just walking out doing, blast impressions, and she kind of juxtaposed how, women are associated with hysteria and occultism, and men are with reason. And so in the film, like I kind of thought it was going to have a predictable vampire ending where the men were going to get there just in time to save her. And then the way it ended, where in the Murnau film, she sacrifices herself in the same way, but it's not through like a sexual act. It's like, I guess he bites her neck and he just takes too long to nibble.
But
But
that
in
is
that,
sexual in 1922.
yes, I guess, yes, yes, yes. So I think I've
Well,
seen
and
racially.
there was a bit about her being a virgin and the fact that she was a virgin, and she had to be a virgin that he nibbled on at dusk. or
Yeah,
at dawn.
right.
That was the
Beca-
recipe. That was the
and
recipe.
it's his feasting upon the feminine that causes him to lose sight of the change in the hour, right?
I thought it was
Yes,
just I thought
exactly.
it was just that good. That's what I thought. I'm sorry.
No, he died because of his vampire boner. But
Oh God.
Alicia, I'm going to follow up on that to get back to the subject that I wanted to broach and
Well,
Vernon
wait,
wanted to
yeah.
talk
Let
about
let
more.
her unpack
And
that. Let
also,
let her cook that, Eric, because that was like I was like I wanted more, and then I was rushing off, and she was rushing off, so I didn't get her to, she didn't unpack it, so I definitely want her to unpack that.
Okay, what am I unpacking? The binaries
The the
that run throughout the
the
eggers?
occult associated with women and
Right.
feminine, and
well,
reason with
and
men.
since you've seen the Herzog version, the gaslighting theme throughout of Lucy in the Herzog version, I think
Mm.
plays into that as
Oh,
well.
oh, and before you get started, let me just make one other observation because otherwise I'm going to forget it.
I'm
So the
dying
thing that,
over here. I'm
yeah,
kidding.
I know, but when I open the box, you're gonna go into professorial mode, and then I'm gonna forget what I was gonna say, and this is brief. So the thing that I really loved, and this is a point that I emphasized to Lucia as we were leaving, is that in the film, the women are always warning the men, bad shit is about to happen. Listen to what we're saying, and the men never listen. And with that, I'm going to transition over to Alicia so we can listen.
Okay, so I was enjoying the film yesterday with Vern and Lucia, but it wasn't lost on me that, for example, what's the friend's name? The friend with whom Ellen stays while her husband goes off to acquire the signature.
She's Lucy in the new movie. Lucy becomes Ellen in the Herzog version, and she's not in the Murnau.
No, but I mean, in the Eggers
Her
version,
friend.
her friend that
Her
she
friend is
stays with,
Anna. Anna.
the couple,
Anna.
Anna, right? So Anna's husband, who's the shipbuilder, right? Hello.
Yes, that's him. Yes.
He is particularly unwilling, incapable of hearing the feminine voice. Like, it's astonishing throughout. It was just very interesting to me that these binaries were certainly being presented, and I think the ending is the Eggers' attempt to deconstruct them, although it's problematic. But you know the women are not only telling the men, as Vern said, this is some bad stuff, and the men aren't listening, but they're responding, right? The women are responding out of what is perceived as an emotionalism, right? And the men are responding from science and reason. And that's a classic Enlightenment binary that is of course undone with Orlok's, the final Orlok moment with Ellen, where, she surrenders herself and sacrifices herself, also in classic Enlightenment mode. Why does the woman always die, right? You know, but, let's just keep with the whole theme. So that was part of it. I have to watch the Eggers again. I hope I can get it at home. And Vern, I can just sit there and list off. I mean, I wasn't doing this yesterday in the film, but the women's reason, which is rooted in their sense of, of in their way of seeing, in their sense of knowing, right, what knowledge is. It's going to be perceived as, and it is perceived consistently throughout the film as, a hysteria, which was, as you all know, a big problem in terms of the representation of women. And so, yeah, I think, Vern, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does indeed.
Well,
No, but
it's
you are
Cassandra,
forgetting
isn't it?
something very important about this in not every vampire movie, but in Nosferatu, and is this uh need for the monster to die like in every three movie. We know that the Nosferatu, the monster, supposed to die in daylight, but in Nosferatu, they have to die within, when they are in bed with a woman. So there comes like so many aspects of it, the
Yeah.
mythological roots,
Yeah.
the archetypal root,
Yeah.
that like and that's where
Yep.
the femme fatale came from, the idea of femme fatale, that is, at the same time, a killer and a savior, the sacrifice, the duality of that. That's the beautiful thing, because it's not represented in the Nosferatu version of, of the vampire, the Dracula story. They're
Mm-hmm.
not this damsel in distress. They
Mm-hmm.
are the savior. That's
Mm-hmm.
the thing. That's the, that's where it kind of subvert that usual type of, the what the damsel in distress who, man comes to help. She is the one who sacrifices herself, because
Yes.
especially in Egger's movie, because she is the one who kind of, instead of running away from her shadow, from her fears, she confronts with the fear. She comes run with it. She she brings out what was oppressed inside her, so she becomes kind of this savior, non-oppressed figure. And that's the whole, Vern, you were so interested in the female gaze, and this is why Nosferatu is, based on the movie look of the film, is not like, it is, it's not the male gaze, even though like it's based on the romanticism and everything, like the history behind it. The sacrificial love and duty here does not come as like the typical, the the cliche style of that. And
But
also, like,
Yasi,
we
I
can
think
also
that
talk
is
about the
so
sexual undertone.
I think
What?
that's so interesting, Yasi, because I agree with you, but I also see her sacrifice as directly connected to her punishment for having the sexual agency or and or spiritual agency that invites the darkness.
You're
And
saying
Yeah,
in
maybe
the
I'm
that
wrong.
and
You're
that.
saying in the Eggers version.
Yeah, and this
You're
In
is,
the
saying
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in
specifically
the
See,
Eggers version.
yeah,
specifically
that
Eggers
that
version.
is the woman as the, anima. She is the anima.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that
the
that and that
yes,
that
yes.
the Maisaki. Yeah, that's what it
Yes.
is. And
Yes.
that it, and the vampire longing for him. Kind of, it brings a balance, but I know what you're saying, but that is exactly where the movie kind of, I think we get to that later, kind of criticize, is the commentary of this look. Vern was saying that no one would listen to them, in all three movies we see,
Right.
I think we get to that later, that why, like this, this aspect of purity, and the kind of,
Why don't we get to that now, Yazzie? Because I think it's a
oh, okay, yeah,
perfect
yeah, yeah.
conversation to bridge off of. And I have a thought before we move on to it, because of course, I don't have to worry about spoiling a 1979 movie, but Herzog turns that on its head because of course Lucy's sacrifice, if Isabella Johnny as Lucy Harker sacrifices herself for absolutely nothing, because at the end Jonathan is turned, and we see him riding off to go get
Oh, that's
presumably to
right.
get to go get to go get Renfield. She sacrifices herself for absolutely nothing, and so Herzog, who is it's a cliche, a German existentialist. I know that that's just like saying a German, but uh, has given this kind of a Kierkegaardian absurdist view of things, which is, this idea that that there is no such thing as a meaningful sacrifice. And the other thing is, throughout, he has all of the characters constantly gaslight, which how you could look at the most, Isabella Johnny, one of the 10 best most beautiful women in the world, and not listen intently to every single word that she says. I have absolutely no idea, but there, everyone is you alluded to in the Edgar's version, the friend's husband, who's basically Lucy can see that her husband is becoming sick with this kind of vampire illness, and he's like, "Oh no, he's got the flu," and Lucy, when she wakes from the nightmare and tries to warn him at the beginning, constantly, it's just like, oh, they're there, you're being hysterical, and it's all the way through. And maybe this is my attempt to try and sell the Herzog version a little better to Vern, but there is this thought through this where by depriving Lucy of her agency and her tragedy, he has almost made this Lucy's story. I had when Yazzie and I were first discussing doing this episode, so this is months and months and months ago. One of the things that I said was I had taken my on my very first date ever in 1986. I took my first date to see the German version of Nosferatu, and thought quite that we're gonna have a scary time. And she said, you know what, if Orlok wasn't a vampire and was just kind of this like third wheel, that would be a wonderful romance. And it really is. Because, and I'm going back to Daniel's point, because the German existentialist has made a very humane film, and in that humanity, you really feel like the gaslighting of Lucy throughout it is what motivates the plot. It's what moves things from A to B to C to D. And so I think that I'm not saying it's feminist by any stretch of the imagination, but it is ironic that by giving Lucy the least agency, that is to say, her sacrifice does not succeed in changing the plot, you've actually created the more feminist characters. But
But
open thoughts on that,
And
Sheila. You on mic? Well, Sheila on mic next.
see,
So
yeah, I've been for over half an hour. I've been trying to get rid of this because it's been on my head ever since yesterday. And the more different of you talk about different aspects, the more it's clear to me that this is very, very, for me, very crucial and at least very interesting. To me, this is the best aspect, what I'm going to talk about now, the best aspect of the Eggers movie. And by the way, if you remember, Eggers, Eggers is part of the name Schwarzenegger. So we're dealing right now with three German names: Murnau, Herzog, and Egger. I don't know where he's from, but that name is a German name. But in that film, I think it should be considered possibly a film about Ellen, because it's also the only film in which I get the complete story. I don't know if it's connected to the way the novel is built, but you will remember that at some point in Eggers' film, she is discussing with him whose fault is it? And she has revealed from the beginning that she has been calling, and she tells her husband, I was able to tell certain things as a kid before they happened. So she seems to have some spiritual or diabolic connection to something that allows her to do the things she does from childhood. And she is discussing with Nosferatu at some point in the bedroom, you called me. he says to her, and he's basically saying, it is your fault that I'm here. I was sleeping, and you were the one who called me alive when you were a child. So in Eggers' film, he's actually, in my understanding, he's pushing the fault of the whole dynamic of what's happening right now because she is the one who woke him up. So it is actually, I'm not trying to say that it's her fault, but when in this dialogue, they're going back and forth, trying to figure out whose fault is it, and they're blaming each other for. And finally, she says, "Okay, so since I am the one that started the whole thing when I was a kid with you, then I will give myself completely," and that's the end of that.
Well, that was sort of
Go
my
ahead, Yazzie.
point. That was sort of my point, Sila, that the Eggers version seems to expand upon and expound upon the quote unquote post lapsarian shame, right? It's Eve all over again. It's your fault. You had this spirituality, you had this
Yes,
sexuality, and
yes.
you drew me. That was, yeah, so that's what I thought was interesting, actually,
I
since it's
like
2024.
I like that very much because it explains. It also tones down the evil of the vampire. He's basically not. I'm not putting it on a woman, but he's basically saying the humans are waking this person up, this evil up. So it's not really. We're not putting all the fault on a monster, but on humanity.
But it's not just humans, it's a woman and it's a woman's sexuality. That's the problem.
Yes,
It's not just
I don't
it's not
disagree. Yeah.
just, you know what I mean? Like the way it's represented, sadly, or interestingly. I mean, look, I think it's complicated and I think it's interesting, but I think that that's we can't, we can't ignore that. I mean, have you've seen the Eggers version, yes?
Yes, I did.
So you saw all the scenes where he's visiting her and he's invisible and
Yes,
they're
yes. Yeah.
hypersexualized. I mean, it's and when that conversation happens, which is very instructive, I think. I think it's instructive for the film to tell the audience that the monster is born of a woman's sexuality. I mean, that's interesting. So the reason we're here and the reason we have this plague is because you've got these desires, girl. Down, girl. You know what I mean?
But you're dismissing something really important. It's because this in Egger's version, it's a totally different story when you look at it, because he is looking at it from the folk aspect. Don't forget that this is folk horror. That says that it
Yes,
wants
yes.
to, yeah, he wants to emphasize on that aspect of the Victorian era, of the source material, where in Victorian era there was this conflict between sexual, because that was the era that why he brings the very Swiss doctor with controversial ideas that then kicked out Dr.
Right.
von France, because he is this, that was the era. They were embracing scientific discoveries and everything, but they didn't have the knowledge of psychology, especially like women, body, and they still don't, but it's a very new topic to science. But the discoveries about women body, and Vern, I get to that later, like from the part that you like, and that's like this aspect of unknown is where that abjects come from. But going back, what we see in Egger's movie is this conflict between they were unable to explain the unknown, the psychosis, the psychological trauma and everything, with scientific discoveries of the time that they were leaning toward. That's why they were trying so hard to distance themselves from the superstition. And we see lots and long dialogues in Egger's movie about this, that, oh, what is her problem, what is her physical problem, but they're still like try to put her in that corset. They try to impose monster in her, but then doctor comes, and as I said, that he says that the
Oh
way
my God, the
to,
corset.
yeah, yeah, the way to kind of, and she, the fact that she sacrifices herself for the society who puts her into that corset instead of listening to her and understanding her. I think that's a very interesting thing. But I want to drag this back to Herzog movie, and it's, when I was saying that, why do you think its monster looks like this, and his relationship with Lucy, and Lucy or Ellen? Yeah, Lucy. It's, I think what we see in that's the folk aspect of it. That's the superstition at the time from Ecker's point of view. But look at it in, as Eric was saying, a very Kierkegaardian, very existential Herzog point of view. I think that's very interesting because his Nosferatu is someone who is, uh, kind of tackled this
He longs
generational
for he
trauma
longs
in
for
gener
death.
yeah, and the generational trauma, and his monster is
Wait,
the monster of war, and the monster, the shadow of war and the mistakes of our fathers past. That is, that's why he's longing more for death than love. And then and after he sees like this gorgeous woman, he's like, we see those the kind of homoeroticism subtext or erotic subtext that we can get to it. But I think that's that existential melancholia in Herzog's comes from his, the never-ending shadows of the mistakes of the past, of the wars of the past. You know, that the and the, as I said, like the generational trauma, that how futile your life can be when you inherit this, this type of cultural despair from the past, this trauma. You cannot connect. This is the plague of his time. you know if his if we want to see Nosferatu as this metaphor for
Interesting.
plague, yeah, see this. I think the decay, his, he seeks for love, for attention, for, all that. It's because he that shadows of the past lingers, and that's why I think scene you see that disillusionment of a post-war war. We see there
you, you
that
keep
is that weight.
you keep drifting into the matrix for like the last 15 seconds.
I'll edit it out.
Yeah. So actually, I just remembered something that when I said I was going to relate this to my childhood trauma, and this is and Yasi, when you listed off all the vampire films, I think I'd seen about 90% of them. So I might have to reevaluate. Well, I guess I don't watch the screamer horror films, but I do watch like vampires and Frankenstein. I do watch those things. But I think one reason that I had a lot of reservations, maybe even um, about vampire movies in general, is I was raised Baptist Methodist, and in my youth, like I think when I got close to my teens, I got very angry with God uh, because of my mother's death, and it took like 7 years for me to process that. And then I got very angry with God. And when I would go, my grandfather, he was a Methodist minister, and I just remember being a child, and so many of the sermons were about the fire and brimstone, and like damnation if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and you have to be this way, and the wages of sin, and it was a lot. It was a lot for a kid, like I was afraid to do lots of things, and I still am. I still have reservations about drinking and smoking and being sinful. And it's, and I've been out of the church since I was 9. But I think when I watch these kind of horror films, like Nosferatu, like that kind of evil, I associate with, my childhood indoctrination in Christianity. And so I think that's one reason I have reservations about watching these films. And it wasn't as bad as Nosferatu, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I still feel haunted by a lot of the imagery that came from my youth. And I think that's one reason I had a lot of reservations. So now I'm glad I got over it because this was not so bad.
I'm sorry. One thing, Vern, I think you should really reconsider that, because vampire is you can this that Jekyll and Hyde dynamic is something that you can find in the mythos of vampire. That dual nature, the civilized versus monstrous. We have vampires like you said, the Christopher Lee, like the Bela Lugosi, those very sophisticated vampires, the Count Draculas. And then vampire is the metaphor for inner conflict again, like Jekyll and Hyde, that transformation, and they transform others. That human condition and all that, and then the mouth and the dichotomy of that, good and evil and everything. Not in. Maybe we can also look at of course, also in these Nosferatus, because that change, they also kind of transfer their plague to them. We have that here too, in Eggers and in Herzog's. you know they and also that goes back again to what I was trying to say about the generational angst and the traumas of the past. The Jekyll and Hyde sort. The vampire is a mirror for human psyche, just like Jekyll and Hyde.
Go
On the
ahead,
point of
Daniel.
religion, something occurs to me, which is that the in contrast to the British novel, the German films are set in northern Germany, right, the Baltic coast, and the journey is to Transylvania and back. And something, a couple of things occur to me. First of all, is that we tend to think of Germany as being split mainly between East and West, right, the communist East versus the capitalist West. But historically, Germany is more split between North and South, the Protestant North versus the Catholic South. And something that Slavoj Žižek said once seems pointed here. He pointed out that that Europeans tend to look always to the south and the east at the other, right? The strange, the foreign, the invasive, the alien, right? A British person will look at the corruption of continental Europe. The French will look down to Italy and the chaos of the traditional
British
yeah,
Northerners look down on Southern Brits too, in the exact
yeah,
same way. Like those
no doubt,
corrupt.
yeah.
If you once you get south of York, it's all whores and cocaine.
Right. So we can speak of the Semitic tropes in the characterization of the vampire, but there's also a kind of vagueness here, which is that the northern Germans are looking at to the south and the east at the alien, right? Whether it doesn't matter if it's Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or Orthodox. It's just there. It's different. It's something that doesn't fit in our culture, in our society. So there's that kind of that fear is represented in the vampire. But a couple other things also. I was looking at digging up some old notes that I had on this. The character of Knock is a real estate agent. It was a kind of a surprisingly mundane role in the supernatural story, but the position of of commerce or a businessman as the foot soldier of the vampire is not entirely unrelated to currents in our real world. The idea that, and certainly in Nazi Germany, the idea that business would become the foot soldier of the terrors.
That's a
Like we
really
see.
interesting point because I was also thinking about, of course, the count is nobility, right, or ostensibly nobility,
Right,
and
right.
everyone else are nice Middle European, bourgeois,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is
Hmm.
interesting. And knock is a real estate agent who, it wasn't so long ago in the 19th century that making money was frowned upon.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that's
That's
just
a
it's just an interesting.
well, quick
Exactly.
quick follow up. Luckily, Daniel, you've seen the Herzog version. I think there is an anti-capitalist theme running through the Herzog version that the other two version doesn't don't have. Harker's doing it for the money. They have this nice house. They own they have a servant. They own they've got beautiful kitties, and yet he says I need to get a larger house for my wife. You know,
Right, right,
and and Isabella Johnny and the way she dresses and the way she talks about clothing and things like that. And there's this anti-materialist, I guess, maybe not anti-capitalist, but anti-materialist theme that runs through the Herzog version that the other two don't touch upon. And it seems to me that part of the power of the existential, for lack of a better term, ending, the meaninglessness of it is kind of the meaninglessness of all the material things. We don't even know if the castle is real or if that's like a projection that Dracula, or I'm sorry, Orlok has created. Because of course, all the townspeople say there's not a there's no castle there. That's just ruins. Now,
right.
it
You
may
might
be just,
remember
it may. Oh, go ahead.
at the end of Herzog's version, doesn't the evil transfers onto Harker, right? And he speaks of riding off, carrying the plague, as it were, to Riga of all places.
Because
And you could say,
that's where Reinfeld's being held. The mental institution is Riga, so he's going to collect Reinfeld. So yeah, yes, you are correct.
aha, yeah. I mean, on one hand, Riga is belongs at that time to the Soviet Union, which is um, communist. On the other hand, it's also the direction that the Hanseatic League spread German culture. So don't know exactly what you make of that.
Very good point. Very good point. But Alicia, also having seen that, and also having kind of touched on those themes, am I putting my own spin on it, my own lefty woke spin on the Herzog version, or was that something that you saw as well?
I have to watch. I'm going to watch the whole Herzog version tonight because I don't remember that, but it might very well be the case. It's certainly all these themes were presented in the Stoker novel, even though it takes place in London and it's not German centered. But I'm going to watch the Herzog version so I can actually respond to you about that because I don't remember that genuinely. But I did remember in the Eggers film, I remembered thinking, here we go with the nice bourgeois guy who wants to, and it was the same in Murnau, right? Like he goes because he's fulfilling a certain role, and he wants to acquire things for his to stabilize the income of his home. But I have to watch the Herzog to respond to you directly.
One other little thing about the
Go ahead.
Murnau, the plague that the vampire carries would have reminded people directly of the Spanish flu that came along after World War One.
Yeah, exactly. That was the plague I was referring to because in 22, what is that? 4 years, 3 years after the Spanish flu emerges, right
That's
after
right.
World War One,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
what disappoints me about the Eggers version is
But
you see the rats coming off the ship, and then and so you are set up to believe that he's going to pull this theme, and we're right after COVID, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be perfect because he can tie in the Spanish flu and COVID and we never see the rats again, and it's almost dropped, quite honestly. Herzog, obviously, the whole town is so decimated by the plague that they can't even arrest the Van Helsing. you know, because there's and you know there's nobody to keep him in jail. You know, and of course the rats are freaking everywhere. But Edgar's there's no payoff, and
No,
that's one of my
well,
disappointments with it.
no, the rats are there. Like they come off the ship, and then when they go into his crypt or wherever, the floor is full of rats, and then that's where they leave Willem Dafoe. He's in there with the gasoline. Like there's a few shots of the rats. I mean, I
I
think that
remember the rats on the streets in
yeah,
the Eggers.
and then they also eat what's his name's wife. You know, she's lying on the floor, and they're
Right.
Well,
that's why they think
I'm talking about the plague element. I'm talking about when we see the rats, we know they're carrying the plague, and then it's not picked up again.
yeah, but they
Like you
do.
drop.
They like that's the thing that's happening. The plague is sweeping through, and they're carrying bodies. They're taking bodies through the
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah.
That's definitely there,
I
Eric.
told you, but something like going back to what Daniel was saying, Eric, do you remember what I said about the Herzog? I said like the that Nosferatu to me is the banality of evil. You know, you can look at it as just like what you said, like the you know, if you want to look at it, you know, as the agents of war and things like that, you know, that is totally explainable by the banality of evil. That how, you know, this, especially because there is in also in Egger's movie, no, in all three, there is this emphasis on the bureaucracy and like paperwork and so many. You see that, and then that lack of self-reflection, that like this plague can enter the society, that can in like kind of spread that easily despite everything that they've been warned. Everybody's that at all the time they've been warned, but this it's like they're so banal, and this evil is so, you know, you don't even see it, you can't see it lurking, but it's there, it's present, but it's
Bruno
there.
Gantz's character actually verbalizes that, and I think the Herzog version tells us what we already know, which is the true evil in the universe is real estate agents.
Exactly, yeah, that's it. And you know, and again with like that theme of evil, that you know, that you can also say that this the isolation that comes from this paperwork and bureaucracy and all that, you know, that's also again the banality of evil.
Well,
And just like you said, that
now going back to the banality of evil, and we all know how I feel about using that phrase for Nazis because most of those people were actually committed. Uh, but in Herzog's version, um, yeah, and some of the comedy that comes out of what I call the belly laughs in the film are the paperwork, you know, you know, and the whole setup seems so odd. Like, I'm thinking of buying a house, so the real estate agent is going to come two countries over to my house to try and sell me on the house as opposed to my visiting him. And which is a plot point in all three. But what Herzog kind of brings to the fore is the absurdity. Like, well, why can't he come to Germany? You know, I mean, how am I going to sell him a piece of property that he hasn't seen, which doesn't come up in the other two versions? And and there's just kind of a funny moment where he's talking about aristocracy, and that this is just how they do things, even though it doesn't make any sense. And there's your banality of evil here. And I thought when you're talking about the paperwork, I thought of Orson Welles's shots in the trial, and I thought of Terry Gilliam later in Brazil. With That's your banality of evil right there, is sitting right in those stacks of paper.
and I was thinking about Jim Jarmusch, that man, that how he used that comedic aspect of this, and that you said that why should he travel? You know, this travel that Sila mentioned, but in Herzog we see Harter, like he walks, those scenes that he walks, they are in total contrast, you know. before he falls into this trap of banality of evil. You know, the way
And
that he travels on foot, that's so important. You know, that's exactly where it differentiates itself from the other movies.
now, speaking of traveling for no reason, in both of the 22 and 79 version, you have uh, Dracula arriving on some kind of a raft, because which would make sense because he's coming from, landlocked Transylvania to landlocked Germany over land. In the Eggers version, he arrives on a large rat-filled ship. Why did he need to take a ship from Transylvania to northern Germany?
He takes a ship also in the other two versions, from the
Well, he
Black
killed.
Sea
Yes, but
around to the Baltic.
yes, but I said raft, but they're just small little crap that you would use to cross like the Rhine or something like that. And he kills
He
the
takes the
captain.
raft down the river to the Romania is connected to the Black
Right,
Sea, right, and
to the
then
Black
from the
Sea.
Black Sea you
Right,
go
right.
through the Bosphorus
Whereas
to.
in the Eggers version, a huge ocean liner on an ocean port comes in. Unfortunately, you haven't seen it, but it's just Daniel. So, but Alicia, Yazzie, Sula, and Vern can testify. It looks like the scene of the boat in Caligula, and what does he need with this huge liner if he's just crossing over? You know, and of course, uh, Herzog with the rap scene, I thought maybe it was like a little self quote, maybe like from Aguirre Wrath of God, because it's almost from the exact same angle. And the rats look almost like the little spider monkeys, which I loved. Which I absolutely loved because I love French New Wave films, and I love the little meta bits. But in the Murnau version, which was secretly filmed at UFA, uh, but they had to spin it off because they needed a company they could declare bankruptcy with in order to avoid the lawsuit from Stoker's widow. Um, in the it, in that particular version, the boat looks perfectly normal, just like what you would cross, a little sea or the Rhine with. And I guess you have to have the scene where he kills the captain for but I don't understand why Eggers felt the need to create a big scene when he had two perfect examples of just a shadow descending on the city and that perfect metaphor and how beautiful. And he's got access to CGI and all sorts of other things. He could have just reproduced that and it would have been 20 times more powerful, and also wouldn't have had me literally laugh out loud at the size of the ship.
I think one thing that I thought with the ship is, and this is like um, a point on class, because I think Thomas he returns on the ship, and of course he's a landed person. He has money. Somehow he survives, and yet everyone else on the ship in both films dies. So I thought that was like maybe. Oh, hold on, I'm eating something. Went down the wrong way.
Because Nosferatu needs him to get to Lucy, or to Ellen in that point. Lucy in the 70. That's so confusing.
But
Go ahead,
what
Yazzie.
about let's talk about the Herzog mice and that
So
movies
many,
and his
so many.
history with
That scene
animals
when
in
they're
the
eating and the
movies.
rats are just like covering the benches. Oh my god! Or when Isabella Johnny is walking up the stairs and the rats like seem to be like parting the ways for him. And Herzog dyed each and every rat the exact same color of gray so that he could get the color spectrum that he wanted. And again, I have no problem with cruelty to rats, having lived on Staten Island for a year. But go ahead, Jesse.
No, but I told you like the surreal and the comedy on that scene. That's so Buñuel, you know, the discreet charm of bourgeoisie. That reminded me so much of that. You know, that decaying mansion, and then the plague feast. The whole uh, idea of this plague feast is hilarious, and it's such a strong metaphor for you know, and you know, the other thing again, I'm sorry, like just for 1 second I digress to the previous one. The other thing about the banality of evil, we can say, we never get any explanation, you know, that why this need for the kill of a vampire, you know, we never get why that he need, it's just his nature to kill, you know. I think that also speaks so much to the banality of evil. But yeah, again, like that feast, that from first of all, that entrance to the square, that from visual and cinematic technique, that the, you know, that very unconventional kind of framing that they bring those uh, you know, caskets into the square, you know, and the way that camera lingers, you know, and the again, that is so, you know, that's where I think he pays the real homage to Murnau, like those faces, the laughing, and you know, the gluttony, the greed, and the food that decays on the table. That is so uh, beautiful, and the faces, the faces that like they slowly paled, and you know, they're, you know, they're on this square, but still we feel some sort of claustrophobia on that, like and I think that is so beautiful to kind of shows this death, being alive, that presence of death, the shadow of death present on in that square. That is so beautiful, you know, that the, also the idea of immortality, you know, that they think that the last thing, and in just opposing this, you know, what are you gonna do in the last day of your life, is this, you know, that is so surreal and nightmarish, and you know, that blending of nightmare and reality, that's so surreal. And also uh, you know, from, if we want to look at, like, from another aspect that we already talked about, that grotesque aspect of it, it's so expressionism.
Anyway, I had a glitch there, so I missed the last part of what Yazzie said. I'm sorry, but opening up to the panel. Let's talk about the three female leads a bit, shall we? We had Greta Schroeder in the first one, who I thought was absolutely perfect for that particular version. Isabella Johnny, I could do a whole podcast on, but and I have to say, for the version that Eggers made, I thought Depth was just perfectly cast. And I mean, she's got her father's eyes, her mother's cheekbones, and her physical performance. You know, just the way her face moved was just absolutely perfect. And quite honestly, in a film that I didn't find that scary, I thought she brought a lot of the scary element to the film that I thought, for instance, Skarsgård's Orlok lacked.
Yeah, I think with the performances, in the Murnau film, she felt like too much of a background character. Like I'm watching it now, and she didn't make strong impressions on me. But the thing that actually made a strong impression after I watched the 24 version is just how much more brash Thomas is. Like he's very brash, and he's and entitled and uh, privilege. You know, like he carries that air about him, and I was really surprised that like in the 24 version, whatever that actor's name is, like he didn't bring any character. Like he felt like a secondary character in like one of those Dickens movies, and so I was surprised to see that in the original he was much more brash and like when he goes to Transylvania and he
He was
orders.
Pip. He was Pip in Great Expectations.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. So
And
so
so yeah,
that
yeah,
that was surprising.
I think you got it. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
And I think he was playing Pip in Great Expectations again.
Yeah. And Lily Rose Depp, like that performance, it was like I really like the performance was outstanding, but I think also what they did with her character and the way that they enriched it. And even though like her character is she's psychically raped at the beginning, and then at the end she's yeah, but it was her story, and it felt like really it made logical sense. It made logical and kind of psychological sense and even moral sense because she does end up sacrificing herself for not just herself or her husband or her marriage, but for the common good. And I like also that she wasn't rescued, and so so I gave it when I initially watched it, I gave it 3.5, but then I think after watching the Murnau, I'm really going to kick it up, a couple because her performance was really outstanding, and I think she really carried the film, and I think like I really kind of like I was a little bit bored with the staging of it until Defoe showed up, but I think taken in her whole performance, I think it was really outstanding, and I think in the end she carried the whole thing.
And Defoe was in his own way rather ghoulish.
Yes.
He's a
Yeah,
very
Luciosa,
restrained performance, I
Transylvania.
thought, for
You
Defoe, though. Very restrained for Defoe, I thought. I mean,
mm,
it was good. It was perfect for the Eggers movie. Go ahead, yeah. I'm sorry.
no, I just want to say Elenosa or Luciosa, uh, tr- the Transylvania Road, like Furiosa. Yeah, Sela was talking about this, and yeah, she is actually, it's more than Nosferatu, it's her story. Sela, you were talking about this. I think now we can go back to what you were saying. This is the Ellen's story more than Nosferatu story. But I think he he learned the lesson, the marketing lesson from Furiosa. So Edgar didn't make the same mistake. But it's her story. It's totally her story.
Yeah, to use a profane expression from my military days, Nosferatu was pussy whipped, and he got what he deserved.
Well, and it's interesting in the Herzog version. Speaking of, just since we're throwing the word pussy around, um, Van Helsing is a bit of a pussy. You know, yeah, he's a guy with no agency, and and when you have the staking scene and what have you, he is the most hesitant, and I don't know if maybe because I haven't read the Stoker novel in several years, if maybe that was the original intent of the Van Helsing, and we've built him up over the years, with your Peter Cushing, or our Lord and Savior Peter Cushing, uh, you know, uh, uh, reformatted, or if that was something that if that was something Herzog had changed. Um, I can't remember, but we happen to have a literature professor on the panel, and so maybe she can enlighten us.
Wait, are you referring to me?
I was.
I think every sounds like everyone on this panel is either a literature or film professor. Um,
Nope.
I
I make bourbon.
well, so the Van Helsing that's forever etched in my memory is the cheesy um overacting of the guy who played in Silence of the Lambs. What's his name? He is now a sir. Uh,
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins. Right, right,
Yeah.
right, right.
In
I mean,
in Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's a mouthful.
right, right. I mean, I think the castration of the men is also a theme that goes along with the the hyper the male hysteria about women's sexual agency, right? And I think that depending upon how Helsing is played, depending upon which film you're looking at, whether it's Nosferatu or Dracula, you're going to see different versions of that castration, whether it's a hyper masculinity or associations with the feminine, which is certainly not castrated, right? I mean, not in life. So, but I wanted to say just a reference to what you were saying earlier, Daniel. I think no, Eric, you were talking about the ship and the raft and and right after you had talked about the real evil in the world is the real estate agent. I just wanted to say that I think in every film Nosferatu carries his own coffin off the raft, off the ship. He's carrying his own freaking house. And I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, I have to think more about this the whether it's a feminization or a castration of the Helsing character. And I have to again watch all of the Herzog.
But in the novel, how does that end? I just started rereading Frankenstein because of the implications with AI. But in the novel, does it end like this, or does Van Helsing come and save the day?
Van Helsing saves the day. But but let me tell you, like, what
Yes.
is my problem with Egger's version of, of the, and it's what Eric was talking about right at the beginning, and something that Sila also talked about, that this is and I also said that the vampire stories, they update themselves. It's a horror trope that he's a monster, that's how he differs himself from werewolves, from mommy, from Frankenstein. He is a very conscious monster. And he but you know so first of all, he explains everything. We're living in the era of the origin story, like explained scientifically, or everything. They like that group of gypsies, they got the use of the gypsies in the book.
I
And
believe Romani people is the preferred
yeah,
nomenclature.
okay, sorry. And I was just using the same term as the book, but and they have a very different role than just come and explain the whole thing to us. This ambiguity of this character is something that leaves it open for the generations to interpret their own. But when you explain everything, you know what happens? To me, especially with that kind of telepathic connection between the Ellen and Orlok, it to me it was like Kylo Ren and Rey. That was totally like Last Jedi. And I was thinking that, oh, look, he's like Jedi mind, Sith mind trick everybody through this. And there's seriously this love hate dynamic between them, this, this kind of stigmas from the past between just like, Ellen and Ray, they kind of say that's why I felt like, just like Sila was saying, that he explained too much of it. He aimed for a very
Well, let's go
feminist
back to your
kind of
Star Wars. Let's
character.
go back to your Star Wars method. Let's go back to your Star Wars metaphor there. So, would you say that the Romani explanation is kind of like the midichlorians of the Edgar's version, in a way?
Yes, in a way, maybe. Yeah, but also,
Because
Gothic
once you've
romanticism.
explained it, it is nowhere near as terrifying.
He
You know,
creates this
because it's
very,
scientific. It's scientific.
yeah, but this Gothic romanticism in Nosferatu. So I understand that it's so similar to the mythic romanticism in Star Wars of sort, or like what, just because like I'm gonna like use Herzog's version. Yeah, that mythology of Star Wars. It's not so. I'm not kind of criticizing it, but I'm saying that there is the he aimed for a lot. Sila says it. He said his movie turned out to be messy, but Edgar, he's very he's a very meticulous filmmaker. The way that he makes movies, they're very kind of German style. That's why he chose this. It was a good choice for him, but it's obvious that this was a passion project and something that he kind of think it was in his head since his childhood. So he thought about it a lot, so he added a lot into it, but instead he could kind of focus on this very modern feminist aspect of the story that he aimed for. This agency that he gave to Ellen character. That was beautiful. That was very well. If he stuck to that instead of like going all over the place.
Well, Sela and I and Daniel will agree with us, even though he hasn't seen the film. Have long had this conversation, um, going back to his rooms on Ingmar Bergman years ago. That when you drain the ambiguity out of film, you take some of the artfulness with it as well. It becomes less of a work of art the more that the director or the writer feels that they have to spoon feed it to you. And Sela, I wonder if you had that same kind of thought that I did, which is that besides the music being too loud, and everything being turned up to 11, there was almost a little bit of a dumbing down of the Eggers version.
I saw it as you already, one of you mentioned before, explaining too much at some point, and also um, there's a type of explanation that is not done by explaining, but by covering up what's not explained. Like, for example, as you mentioned before, I think Yasi mentioned how he makes his way by foot. But in Eggers' film, everything is magic. So that's how he's explaining it. He's explaining it by putting magic into this wagon that appears all of a sudden, and all of a sudden parts of the wagon disappear, and all of a sudden the wagon opens itself. And for me, that is just too. It's too artificial. It's too bombastic. It's
I'm
too
going to defend
phenomenal.
that choice. I'm going to defend that choice as being true to the 22 original because of course Murnau uses tricks with the coach to make it look like the coach is going hundreds and hundreds of miles an hour, and he has the his version of the
Yes,
Johnson
but
marker stick his head out the window.
yes, but more now. But more now is using a different language. He's using a very minimalistic language. He's using drawings. He's using very simplistic forms of language to explain because we don't have the sound, so we have the emotionality of what we interpret ourselves, and with the mimicry and pantomime. For me, that's very different. Eggers should not be doing this. He doesn't have a pantomime movie. He doesn't have a silent film. And for that reason, he's using all the tools he has, and he has to use them bombastically. I didn't like that.
Well, no, and it was my least favorite
Exactly.
part of the film too. The Marvel, the Marvel superhero elements of the film. I agree with you 100%. I was just kind of defending it as like that. It's not completely out of the realm of the Nosferatu trilogy. Obviously, Herzog didn't use any of those types of things, but he was creating a different, a slower paced, more um, um, intellectual movie than either Murnau or Eggers.
And
So
to
Yasi,
coach. Oh yeah, go ahead, Stila. Go ahead.
no, Yasi sent me this interview. Well, it's not an interview. It's just a video where you see a young Herzog playing a recording which he did not know to have existed, which was made of him in certain so-called, let's say, conversations with Kinski. And he just goes on to explain how he learned. He's an autodidact, according to him, but from one person he did learn a lot, and that was from Kinski. And he talks about the slowness of speaking and of movement that Kinski used. And when they had a fight, as they had many, according to what I read, Kinski had a good understanding with the mask artist. Other than that, he was having problems with everyone. But the slowness that you see Kinski using when Jonathan comes to his house, everything is very slow, and I don't think that Eggers allows himself at all to just take it slow. And for me, that's part of the exceptional acting of Kinski in this particular film. Not always, but in this particular film, because he is so intense in everything, but he has used this intensity into nothing, and the movements. Um, the way he looks, the way he puts a paper on in front of his face, and then he suddenly he looks at. I mean, it's just fantastic. The space given to everything that's taking place, and I don't see Eggers giving room to anything. He has to explain everything.
So
And,
Stila.
and, and
Hold on, wait,
So,
wait.
oh, sorry.
Before you guys go, I need to segue real quick. I need to. I'm standing on my rights as host of the room to segue into a shameless plug, which is that on February 16th at 3 p.m. we'll be recording for February 18th release date on YouTube and the podcast channels, an episode on two documentaries, one called Burden of Dreams about Herzog filming uh, the film Fitzcarraldo with Klaus Kinski, and the second is called My Best Fiend, which was directed by Herzog about his relationship with a man who I actually would have, if all the stories about him are true, paid good money to have seen beaten to death by an angry mob. Klaus Kinski, wonderful actor, terrible human being.
so what I was gonna say when I unmiked was that was all I needed to watch the Werner Herzog version. So I'm in, and now I'm doubly in now because now we have to talk about these other films. So I'm going to get over my aversion to
Yeah.
Herzog now.
Yeah.
February 16th, Clubhouse, 3
Yeah.
p.m.
So
Guys, I have to leave, but I just wanted to say quickly, I think there was some question earlier about Eggers and his last name and whether he too is German, but I'm pretty sure that's his stepfather's name. He actually, the guy who directed the 2024 film Nosferatu, did not know who his biological father was. Now, that doesn't mean that he isn't raised by, his stepfather, maybe German, I don't know, but his stepfather was actually an English literature professor. But anyway, I got to go. This was a great Thank you so much for having me. This was a really great session, and I would love to attend future ones. I don't know if I can attend the next one, but if I can, prepared by seeing everything, I will.
Please do.
Thanks for coming. Come back in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about Sunrise by Murnau in my group.
Yeah, I'll bring her back.
Nice,
I'll drag her back.
Thanks.
Super.
nice meeting you, Alicia.
Oh, it was
Bye,
great
Alicia.
meeting you, Sila, and Daniel, and of course Yasi, and gosh, hang on,
Eric.
and Eric, and yeah, and everybody else.
Alicia,
Thank
I'm
you.
Thank
always
you.
like
Bye
the
bye.
only one. Oh, she's gone. Okay, so Sila, I have a question about Wagner. I told you on Friday that how Herzog uses Wagner to kind of show this tragic heroism and isolation, and how he kind of creates arc for the characters with the use of Wagner, because he uses this when Harnett when Thomas arrives, Jonathan or Thomas. Oh my goodness, I confused these characters together. That he arrives on his walk to the castle, and when Orlok comes to see, Lucy. So it's like each of them arrive to where they supposed to be with use of Wagner. And what is this? Why Wagner? What is this? Uh, you know, why use of Wagner? Yeah, because he uses other kind of music in the movies, but why in these two particular scenes?
I think you would have to ask him. The only thing I gather from it is trying to make some type of connection to either the opera or the idea of gold, because the piece he uses is from Rheingold. So it's basically the gold found or hidden in the river Rhine. That's what the opera is. That's the title. I don't know if Herzog sees a connection somewhere historically or in his mind or artistically. But that's the only thing I can say to that, because that just because it's Rheingold. But I just found that interesting that the composition was premiered around the same time that the movie is taking place.
Oh, is that so? Another question: is there a supernatural aspect to Wagner,
100,
to his music, to
100%,
opera?
100% mythological. All his work is pretty much based on legends, on mythology, on philosophy. That's Wagner all the way.
Well, thank you. I got my answer.
So I had some questions because I know Eric likes to nerd out on all the cinematic elements, and so when I
Correction,
watch the
love. Correction, love. To nerd out. Okay.
cuts, okay, there you go. So I did have a question about like when I watched the 22 version, like the different color tintings that they use. Is there a method to that?
Yeah, sepia for the interiors was used to hide the grain because they couldn't have them lit as well. And then the blue was to designate night because they were filming in sunlight, and if you had the blue filter on, it would make the sun look like the moon. And people and they still use it today. As a matter of fact, the famous Francois Truffaut film Day for Night, Le New Americain, is a phrase for that filter that they use. It just turns everything blue, and we as cinema goers, ever since it was first introduced in about 1907, have just said, "Oh, it's blue. That means it's night." And you can watch Fear the Walking Dead today, or the new Lord of the Rings, and they're still using them. as their like, oh, okay, they've got a blue filter on. This scene takes place at night. Um, I don't know what the meaning of the red filters that he uses are, because they seem to be, like at the end when he cuts away and then there's a red filter. It seems to be almost arbitrary, and I've always wondered, because we don't know what the actual original prints look like, if that was something accidental or something, because it just doesn't make any sense to me why the scenes are dyed red, because there's nothing in the scenes that are red that make any sense. They're not violent, they're not bloody. I don't have an answer for the red filters, but that's the answer to the blue, the sepia. Oh, and the yellow filter, obviously, for daylight.
So I have another technical question or practical. I When I was watching the movie Herzog's, I'm saying to myself, this is this is impossibly Germany. This is not. This cannot be Germany. So I looked it up, and it's indeed the Netherlands. You could tell right away it's the Netherlands. So, do you have any idea why he filmed uh, that in the Netherlands instead of Weimar?
Taxes and filming permits, because no one else would allow him to pull thousands and thousands of rats into their town, are the answers. And I'd like to thank Yazzie for my ability to answer both of those, because I got that from one of the documentaries that he personally sent me.
Okay, and one more thing is that I asked you, Eric, before, that in Egger's version, I asked you that how but there is something. See, like you said, everything happened by magic, like the Jedi tricks in the movie. But he uses is that in editing, those transitions, the Nosferatu's transitions at the very, like, the first hour of the movie, but those smooth moves of him. Sorry, I found that those camera moves and editings really interesting, though. That he's in front of him and then he's behind him. And then I asked you, Eric, that, because there is something, his movie is very dark. Like, and I was expecting that when he splits the screen and we see all these, from transitions from darks into light, from dark into light, I was I'm not saying that just because it I didn't see anything, so it's bad. I'm asking, like, what is the point of framing like this, if and using the film, the celluloid, the 35, instead of digital, if you are not using it to kind of make the dark darker, to bolden the colors, and that the blue and the depth of field. But actually, I told you, he used the depth of field really good, the close-ups really good. But why? But it's like, because he could do it, we see it in Murnau's. It's done perfectly. Those chiaroscuros, all that. That's like the master class of that. Like, everyone copied what happened there. But he does, the techniques that he uses in for Egger uses, does not come to play for the sake of his narrative, or to create fear for the sake of his genre. He and then he has this good technique, but then he uses the jump scare. So do you think, is that a technical reason, or that's like a artistic directorial
Uh,
choice?
my answer is he wanted the film grain, is the only answer, because to go back to your original point, this film would have been 100% better looking if it had been filmed in digital as opposed to on 35 millimeter. I was lucky enough to watch the 35 millimeter print of it just because our cinema in town had it. But Yazzie, you said you were confused because the camera kept panning to things and you thought that there was something going on in the shadow. And I said, no, I was in a theater that had a perfectly good light bulb. And it's just murky. And my answer is he wanted the film grain. I'm sorry. I know this is an unpopular opinion, but we need to stop fetishizing film grain because I'm telling you, if Billy Wilder, F.W. Murnau, or Werner Herzog could go back in time and eliminate every single film blotch and every single spot of film grain and get the clarity that they could get now filming at 78, 90 frames per second, they would. But Eggers wanted to, because you can't really digitally recreate that feeling of celluloid going through a projector and the little spots of white between the dots, and that's that's the only reason he kept he kept it on 35 millimeter because quite honestly there are several shots in this film that make absolutely no sense because the dark in the back isn't contrasting enough with the front for us to even see what's going on. The shot of the mirror with the shadow in the mirror, it takes your eyes a few seconds to adjust because it is not deliberately obscure, it is just murky. And that is one of my criticisms of the film is the look of the film is not up to either the Herzog nor the nor the 1922 Murnau version for that reason. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes. You know, the other thing is when you explain so much, like what Sila was saying, the thing is you kind of there are some aspects of, you know, the, the as I said before, this mystery, this ambiguity of uh uh this trope, this monster Orlok that is that cannot be articulate. So that's why I think the more now version is so good. Even like even we don't see like when the the Herzog version Olak speaks very little. Like what that's the only time that we see him really having a conversation is on the beautiful mirror scene that we don't see him, but we see his shadow that he starts like having this very existential conversation. But that's the thing. Like he puts a lot into his movie that has been done before in a very minimalistic way and said so much more, you know, and that even the tragical aspect that he wanted he I think he wanted to create a, you know, an isolated monster. He's emphasis is on the isolation, you know, more than that the alienation in Herzog. I think he wanted to, but he I don't think he could deliver on that. That is actually very personal.
Go ahead,
By
Daniel.
the way, I've recovered a word that I was looking for before. I was describing Kinski's performance. I talked about the loneliness, the humanity that he projects. But there's another word that my friend Larry used to describe him. He's apologetic. It's like he's sorry to be a vampire, but it's his nature, and he'll be a vampire, but he understands that he's a monster.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
he
and
does not want.
Burn But would you agree that Kinski is 1,000 times more terrifying than Sarsgaard in the French version.
You know, I just finished the Murnau version, and I subscribed to one of these other services on Amazon. And as soon as it finished, I looked up and there were all these skulls on the screen. And I'm like, what the hell is happening here? And then it started auto playing the Kinski version. So I was like, oh my goodness, now I have to watch it.
But Sila, what you were saying? You were saying
It escaped me. What was the question?
the he's apologetic. That was a great point. Like he's very apologetic vampire. He's not
Yes,
proud of his power.
yes, and I think that goes back to this. It's kind of a fight discussion in Egger's film, the one I mentioned before, when she's complaining to him about what he's doing, and he's complaining to her about what she's doing. So in that film, for me, it takes away from the evil that we see in a monster and seeing us as a victim. But in both films, especially in Herzog's, he's making very clear with the persona of Kinski that he is a victim. He doesn't. I don't even think he sees himself as a monster. He's a victim both of not having love. He wants to be loved the way she loves her husband, and he talks many times about how dreadful it is every century to just dreadfully go through every single hour of the day for he's not happy. He doesn't really want to, but he's just his ancestors have been doing it, and he's just a victim.
Yeah, he sees it's not a power, it's a curse. That's how he sees it
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Isn't it interesting that two Germans, Murnau and Herzog, have created the least Freudian version of a vampire that I think I've seen on screen, and that when the American comes in, he dips their almost anti-Freud uh, 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 Nosferatu in Freudian symbolism all the way through. And there's a part of me that wonders, I, I, and maybe I'm wrong, but do you think Egbert even got it? Like understood the difference between a Nosferatu and say Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee?
Oh, actually, the repression idea and the uncanny idea that is so Freud that is all over the Murnau and Herzog's. Also the sexuality and the vampire. That is something that it's so like kind of focus of Herzog's. You know, I
Yeah,
think that is. Mm.
yeah. When I was watching it, it felt a lot like Edgers was going for. Like I was like, is this The Exorcist? Is this the Wolfman? Is this Frankenstein? Because he didn't feel like Dracula.
No,
In,
you know
in,
what it felt like? A symbol. It felt like um and and I don't want to say that to degrade it, but it felt like he was a metaphor for, and then insert here.
Well,
It didn't feel like a character.
they explicitly say, like he explicitly says, "I am death," and then he's also associated with some other abstraction. I couldn't remember what it was, but once he said, "I'm death," and then somebody else called him some other abstract. I think she calls him some other abstract concept. So they go.
The wind was the metaphor. Yes.
well, I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. I saw once I finished the 24 film from Eggers yesterday. To me, it was very clear that all three films are very much projecting the spirit of their time. You know, the 1922 with a very minimalistic pantomime like is just that period. Then the 79, that period, and 24, this exaggeration of everything because we have the ability to do everything. And a kind of funny point to your question before, these two Germans might not be doing Freud because Freud was Austrian, and the Austrians and the Germans don't always like each other.
You know, I was
And
thinking
it
when
didn't turn out very well when the Austrians and the Germans got together. Just saying.
you know, when the film first started and they had the shots of the rats, I was expecting that the rats were going to form up into like a CGI Nosferatu. So I appreciated the restraint that he didn't go for like a CGI version anyway.
I have a question for you guys. Has anybody picked up Werner Herzog's reaction to Egger's movie? Because
Actually, I looked for that. I couldn't find anything.
I would like to know.
Yeah, me
I'd like
too,
to know
me
what he
too.
thought.
I doubt very highly he'll do that because he is very good about for instance when he made the Port of Call sequel to
Yeah,
that Nicolas Cage movie and he came under criticism from the director of the first one
yeah.
and he was asked
David
about it.
Ferrara. Yeah.
Yeah, he refused to say a word about it,
He,
you
he,
know.
he said he said that, that criticism is like the thunder in the distance. It means nothing to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I doubt very highly you're going to see him make comments on this. Um, uh, uh, I did find funny the meme that's going around of him commenting on the second Home Alone film and how the Joe Pesci character is the hero who overcomes all the obstacles. Whether or not it was real, it sounds like something he would say.
Doesn't Trump
Oh,
make an appearance in the second Home Alone?
yes, he
Yes,
did.
yes, he, yes,
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 he did.
yes, 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 he does. Speaking of the true evil in the universe being real estate agents.
Yes, that crossed my mind earlier. I was going to say something, but
Yeah. So something that Vern, you're gonna like this question that I'm going to bring up because we used to like find all of this underlining homosexual themes in noir movies. So, but it is so obvious here, right? In Herzog and in Eggers, you know, this suppression of homosexuality and bisexuality, you know, and especially like the you in Eggers' version, this Orlog as a catalyst for that. You know, the moment that Thomas kind of looks in the mirror and sees those, you know, the bite marks on his neck, and then he goes uh, to church and they try to Mike Pence him, you know, so the homosexuality out of him. I think right, that was, I think that in Egger's version, that kind of shame that, you know, Morlock as, you know, the manifestation or the personification of shame in him as the homosexual, and in Ellen as like the shame for this sexual desire that his husband cannot kind of satisfy for the reasons that, you know, in a very subtextual layer, you know, very subtle set in the movie. But in Herzog version, on the other hand, he openly says, he says like, let's share it together, let's share this love, the
Well,
three of
and
us together.
he goes to town on that finger in a way that could mean nothing else. I mean, speaking of symbolism.
The interesting thing is that you people probably know this, but Murnau was homosexual, and I didn't see any tendency in his film.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm not gonna go 100% that he was a homosexual simply because um and I understand he has become part of queer cinema, and they're reading subtext into it, but simply because the rumors about what happened when he died, and the rumors about him and his Filipino are rumors I've heard about people who I happen to know are not, and Murnau never explicitly said so. And I misspoke yesterday because I had thought he was open because I was reading, some of this queer cinema stuff. And if he was, then he was also a closeted homosexual, which is his right. And to Scylla's point, I don't see it in his film. So even if he was, I don't think it affected his work in any way, shape, or form. But there is actually no evidence. And also, Fritz Lang um, was one of only 11 people that showed up at his funeral, and spent a long time explaining that he did not believe that, and he started his career as Murnau's assistant, and knew him better than almost anyone. So that would be what I would say.
Daniel, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say that I don't have anything definite. A student of mine wrote her midterm on the queer side of the 22 version, and I ought to reread it and see what she had to say.
Yeah, Carl, I think is trying to come up, so I tried to invite him, and I see his hand is up, but it's not working. Can you try, Eric?
I believe he fixed it. Hey, Carl, introduce yourself to the panel and give us some of your thoughts.
I'm embarrassed to say that I pressed this button by mistake, but having been summoned, I thought I'd just come up, but I'll listen. I just woke up and I'm just being to listen to this room, but a good topic. Thank you.
Well, glad we could be your morning cup of Joe, Carl, and we appreciate you being here. I don't want to kibosh the queer cinema role, because I guess I should make it explicit that I understand the need for a marginalized people to look for other members of their group to identify with. And so so I'm not saying that this in a negative way about listing Murnau as one of them, but I also just want to point out that any unmarried man in Hollywood had those type of rumors about him. So you're going to find, Clark Gable mentioned, in these type of rumors. And perhaps again it's true, who knows, but if he doesn't explicitly live openly as a gay person, which unfortunately society wouldn't allow, then it is all guesswork as far as I'm concerned. But I'm willing to listen to other opinions.
But in general, let's look at it. Something that Vern brought up, and Alicia, we were talking about at the beginning of the room. That I'm so sorry that she left, because I wanted to talk about like this Victorian repression of women, and see how they, how much it's, the subversion of that in all three movies. This kind of pure devotion, like sacrifice of women, and their psychology and their needs being suppressed and neglected, through this cryptic haunting dreams in all three movies. And especially like in Herzog, she is unusually perceptive, and just like Bird was saying, that she was keep trying to warn everyone, and nobody kind of paid attention to her uh, warnings. If they would, like, things would have been different. And then when we get Ellen in Egger's version, it's like uh, the story's totally different. She, and I think it's not a sacrifice. that the you guys were talking about. On the other hand, I think it's a sort of liberation for her. You know, that through uh uh it's through this character of as I said, like he was the catalyst on the Herzog version, Orlok, but here he is sort of like, you know her death, her sacrifice is both tragic and redemptive of sort, you know and she kind of liberates from that suppression. I think it's not
Well,
sacrifice is not the word I use.
here's where I'm gonna defend the Eggers version because I think the best of the three in terms of of showing that point is the creation of depth. Uh, um, oh, is she Lucy in that one, or is she Emma, or I Ellen, or I get them all confused. Ellen. Okay. It is the best. I think is the best overall. Now, obviously, I'm going to pick Isabella Johnny for her performance, but there are times where Herzog shows her as mean. Am I wrong? Where you aren't meant to sympathize with her. She does. She comes across as kind of a little bit of a battle axe in the Herzog version, whereas Eggers, I think, has created a character, and definitely through Depp's performance, because and where I had a lot more empathy with her, and so when that ending comes, I did feel a bit of loss because I had come to identify with her, which I hadn't even with as much as I love Isabella Johnny, and it's a wonderful, wonderful performance. I obviously my favorite performance of the three, but the character she's playing, um, you don't feel her loss the way you do in the Bruce version.
Yeah, and I told you, like, the thing about Lily Depp Rose is that, I told you that I think that she did her homework really well. Is that not even she watched the Herzog version, Isabella Jenny's like this. She went like deeper. She watched the possession from Isabella Jenny that is sort like kind of the Exorcist movie, but the Exorcist minus all the bites and fight, but on that kind of childhood assault and the sexual assault aspect of that film, and she focused on that and brought that Isabel Adjani to the Nosferatu. That possession as the personification of shame, also that we see in Exorcist and in Possession. You know.
And the acting that she does with her eyes is just excellent. I mean, it is a great performance. I don't follow the Oscar rates, but I assume she's going to be a front runner for at least for. I mean, she should be Best Actress because it's really her film, but it'll probably be Best Supporting Actress because Hollywood. But I mean, it is definitely, and I do recommend people go see the Eggers film, despite my misgivings about it. I think it's also a very entertaining film, but just to see that performance because she is excellent in this film. She is not just a very pretty model, and her physical performance is, her line reading, okay, yeah, but she's given some very silly things to say as well. But her physical performance, and the way she uses her face, and especially the way she acts with her eyes and with her mouth, it is, I think, a lesson in how to use a beautiful woman in a film without uh, uh, making it a film about a beautiful woman.
Amen to that. And also the use of location, that this orienting, that aspect of the camera use in Eggers' movie is so good. That the disorientation in the castle, that he pulled it off really well. And the gothic, the gothic in the set design is so good.
So,
Yeah, which is interesting because there are some bizarre camera movements in the Eggers film, like that make to me absolutely no sense as a cinema goer who's seen a lot of films, where he seems to be queuing up something. When you pan to something, generally your audience expectation is that whatever you're panning to is something that we as an audience should focus to. And there are several pans in this film where he will pan to just kind of a dark space and then cut to the next scene, almost if he's using the pan as a form of a fade in and fade out. And they just come off as bizarre and incomprehensible. But yes, you're correct though in pointing out just what a great job he does with the camera movement throughout the castle and how he makes that castle feel so large in his choice of he's only using about a 50 millimeter lens, so it's not extremely wide, uh, but it goes against the convention that we always think of Hammer, which is the camera basically set on the floor on a hi hat with the underneath lighting. He's using these overhead shots with a tracking camera, which I have no idea how he did it technically, you know. Um, and I think of I think of the Steadicam use in Kubrick in The Shining, and it does create some of the eerier effects of the movie. So yes, yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out because that is those are probably the best looking scenes in the film.
Sila, you were saying
yeah, you were just talking about the performance of Depp. As I mentioned before, the the Eggers character is connecting to her culpability of how the whole thing started because she knows herself that she has been calling him since she was a child. The one from Herzog, as far as I remember, doesn't have any reason to feel guilty. So she's just helping. She's just dealing with her situation with her husband, and she's basically just trying to do what she can. But by Ellen being aware that she is the one who resuscitated um, uh, Nosferatu, she's kind of driving a schizophrenic situation where she's on one side, she knows as a child that she did it, that she started wanting him, and now even at some part of the movie, I forgot to say this at the beginning. There's a part of the movie that I remember very clearly where she is showing her conflicting situation between wanting him but knowing that she has to do her part to how should I say that?
to be a devoted wife, to keep her purity.
Not a devoted wife, a devoted human. And that's why I had a little bit of problems, not because I was against what Alicia said, but because I think I read a lot of a humanistic aspect in that situation and less of a gender oriented one. And so she's really convinced that she has the desires. She knows that. She's very aware of that. But she also knows I must um, I must get rid of this guy. I must do
I
my
want to
part
drill
as a
down on
human.
that, but to do that, I have to backtrack on when I promised that we'd do the Eggers film spoiler free. So those listening on the podcast or on YouTube, skip over the next couple of minutes if you don't want the spoilers. I'm just gonna give a second.
Aren't we like 3 hours in?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly,
No,
exactly. I think we'll be.
many movies,
I think
Eric,
we'll be fine.
many times we did the spoiler of the ending. I'm sorry.
No, but what we didn't spoil is the fact that she is in control of Dracula at the end of this version, and it's the only version where she actually can. She you said Jedi mind control, but you didn't refer to exactly. She
But
is
I
given
want to
the
see.
agency.
Yeah, but I wanted
Go
to
ahead,
hear
go
what
ahead,
Sela
Yaz.
was saying. I wanted Sela to.
No, well, okay. I'll repeat the question in a couple of minutes. But another thing that I forgot that I wanted to say this too, and that is that when um oh shit, I'm forgetting that it was a very fragile aspect about her situation. So what is it that you want me to expand on or explain?
That it's not just a woman aspect of it. It's the human
Yes,
aspect.
yes,
It's the virtue of humanity that she's
yes. Because
protecting. I really like that take.
because it doesn't matter if she's a woman or a man, because she could have woken up a female vampire. So for me, that's not relevant. The relevance for me in this point that I'm trying to make is that she she's the person who woke him up, so she has to get rid of him. It's her responsibility. And I love that dialogue when they're blaming each other. He's saying, "Well, you called me, and you seduced me." No, but you called me. I was asleep.
It is interesting though. It is interesting though, because is Dracula at that point the third wheel in their marriage, the way he has become in the Herzog version of the story, or is there something else going on? Is he an escape for her from that marriage? And there's a suggestion of that in the Eggers version that the other two films, I think, somewhat lack. And Yazzie hinted at this earlier, but there's something like almost like a relief, an escape when she sacrifices herself, that she doesn't have to put up with all these shitty men anymore.
Because that's very interesting because the monster does not like you're right, Sila, like about what Alicia was saying. The monster does not belong only to, that monster belongs to all of us. But she felt the duty to sacrifice herself because she kind of felt this transgression of sort, to like bring him back to life. That's a dramatic irony of that of sort. I think
And
that's very
Jelena
interesting.
in the comments, says it's always her fault. And again, this goes back to the Cassandra syndrome from good old Homer. You know, um, the people who can see the future, women can see the future, but no one will believe them. You know, which is the running theme throughout all three of these. And Vern, I think, also made that point.
I mean, there's a lot of detail uh, in this dynamic. It's not enough to say that she sees herself as being at fault, because the fact is that he is there and he's available, even as she was a child, even his ancestors. But in her defense, she, as very clearly is shown in Eggers' film, she has always had an ability to see things that nobody else saw. So we can put this fault aside. She's just able to see things. She recounts having seen something that her mother did before her mother did it. So she has an ability to see things. So based on that, we cannot say it's her fault. She just has abilities to see what's already there.
You know, I was when we finished watching the movie, and I think we got home with Lucia and I was talking about it. And one of the things that I talked about was just, like these kind of bookended rape scenes where the first one is kind of a virtual rape. And that's the kind of thing, like when you watch, like I've watched, there's a few Star Trek episodes where characters are psychically molested. And, that's what happens at the beginning. And of course, she's a minor, it's in her dreams, so she can't consent. And then the other thing I said is with the final act, because it's coercive. Like she doesn't like if she wants to save the people, the village, the city, her husband, she has to sacrifice herself. And so she couldn't give consent in either case. And so I thought it was, given the moment that we're in, and I just finished reading The Handmaid's Tale, where, like I guess June is the character. She can't really consent in her relationship to the commander because she's basically enslaved. And I was thinking that there's this movie I can't remember what it is, but Ralph, I can't remember. I wanted to look it up before we came, but it's this Ralph Fiennes is in it, and it's there's like these virtual reality headsets that people are wearing where you can live through someone else's experience. I forget what it's called, but
Oh,
That
the
was
Spielberg
Johnny.
movie, Ready Player One. Is that?
no, no,
No,
no,
no,
no,
it's
no,
the
no.
Strange
It's
Days. Victor
Strange
Chong.
Days, right? That's it.
Victor Chong just piped in. Thank you, Victor. We always appreciate you.
Right. And the thing is like, like I'm a technologist, and I think by the time my children are my age, that technology will be real. Like the VR headsets that Meta is developing, that's going to be a reality where, and I think this happens in like the Black Mirror. I think there's an episode, where these kind of virtual assaults, they're going to be a thing. So I think this film in that time or this phenomena is going to look, a little bit prescient. So I thought that was something that was interesting that I thought, after I watched it.
Oh, I really liked that because all I was complaining was that he did not leave anything for the next generation to work on. Now I'm pretty happy with Ecker's movie, so I take back everything. Thank you. I'm so happy with him right now.
We probably up because Daniel had to drop out, and I understand you people have bills and Scylla, it's midnight there in Spain. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna do
yeah.
I'm gonna do a
I'm
once.
not the only one who's in the right time.
Yeah, you're in the Matrix, Eric.
Mate, Eric, we can't hear you.
Is it me? Or is it?
No, no, he's in the Matrix. Okay, so I just say one more thing, very geeky thing. Sorry, Vern, we still didn't get to the again to the object, which I was really wanted to talk about, but I guess it we're gonna even. But because it's so important to mention this, it's this very Roland Barthes kind of, just because it's a myth that it's keep reviving and keep coming back, the iconography of the vampire, I think, and the sun and the light, and all that in and the existential themes and death, the you know the myth and the cultural code of vampire, I think we I had to bring that up, that is something very interesting to study and to contemplate on. And the the way that Egger uses it as the society and judgment, and the role of the female protagonist in all the movies, all three movies, and all that. And again, I say this, this trope, this icon, this horror creature, that is keep repeating itself. It's keep coming back to pop culture, with different kind of as Sila also said, in different generations represents different things. There are different adaptations, different narrative structures about it. So it's something that very interesting if you want to like study them through Roland Barthes' studies of the myth, and the existential themes through the juxtapositions, the contrasts, and the metaphor, of course. Like it in different eras, it has different meanings. I just wanted to say that, yeah, where that idea comes from, and a very interesting other thing that we can like uh, study, um, in with the like the Nosferatu, is through the female gaze. We said at the beginning, like, what does it mean, like in different eras, uh, uh, and all that. Also, like the tragedy of immortality. We can look at the because in Laura Murphy, she also talks about like why this gaze matters, because like, which characters and have tragic endings, which of them have like more kind of similar role in the the minds, and they create this immortality through gaze. So this is so important to give the agencies, especially in horror movies, because horror movies dare and they go to places that other genres do not allow themselves to go. That's why it's so important to have the representation in movies through this genre. And yep, this was like, I think if like someone wants to go like do more studies, there's so many things that they can go study in. And of course, that like to summon it all up, the objection theory, and how like, something that we call bad today, like how it's going to change tomorrow, like our point of view of women, like how the women body has always been used as this subject of fear, and and creatures that can be ignored, not as humans, not as people as part of the society. So this is a very interesting study, especially through Nosferatu, because it's women have like agency in these movies, and you can compare it to like so many other horror movies, like even the Dracula movies or the source material, that it has like totally different interpretation of it. So this like study of women in Nosferatu is such a kind of, even the 22 version Nosferatu, the Murnau, is a very modern look. And that's why I think, it's so important, like to movies, to the thing that we were talking about with Sila, that it's something that Martin Scorsese does. And it's so important to keep these movies alive, because they have this impact on the generations, and they become this exemplary movies for others to look up to. And after 102 years, make like same thing. And I just like want to end with Herzog's quote, that he says that the good, because of that walking scene in his Nosferatu, that he says that uh, the world reveals itself to those who travel by foot. And that's why that scene is so important to him. And I thought that it was so beautiful, so I had to bring that up.
Thank you, Yazzie. Vern and Sela. So I guess we'll start with Vern.
Yeah, I'm like trying to cook here, and I don't have any big rap except that I am definitely going to watch the Werner Herzog uh, sometime this week, maybe even tonight after I finish making dinner. So I want to thank you all for that.
Well, we'll be glad to hear your reflections on it, Vern, because of course we do respect your opinion. Sheila Bloom, your final word there from sunny Spain. Well, not sunny right now because it's midnight.
Well, I have already said enough about these films. I'm very glad we were able to connect. I think this is the first time I do something like this, deal with the same topic from three directors with three different dynamics and three very different time uh, frames. So that was quite a joy to do that, especially with all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila. Um, Throughout this, I'm going to have the little bits of the music score also edited in. We are going to try um, and get Jelena up here. Hang on just a moment. She actually has something to say. Oh wait, nope, she was waving goodbye.
No,
Never
that
mind.
was like she was very. No, well,
Uh,
one thing. If just because we like Vern and I, we always go on this like things. Uh, if you have time, Vern, if you want to stay, just because you said that because of the psychological thing, if you have time, you can stay. Eric, you can use this later in the podcast, or like you can take this out. But because we were talking about it, and he said that he had traumas that always like prevented him from watching horrors or something. I thought that I can like wrap that up with the thing that I always trying to explain to him. So that's it.
I'm being a little tongue in cheek when I say that, but I do have feels like a natural aversion to it. But I'm gonna push through it. I'm gonna watch more horror, I think, except not the Scream movies. Like just watching women get killed and maimed and brutalized. That's not my thing.
That's
well, there's that.
exactly what I want to explain to you. Why that's it.
Well, that alone, I think we've made a breakthrough. We've got Vern talking about watching horror films. So Yazzie and I are going to walk around on our little cloud nine because that's all I wanted from life. How about you, Yazzie?
Yeah, that's yeah, totally. Yeah. I'm good for that. Yeah, that's it. If you're going to watch, and if you're going to overcome that feeling that, oh, why? why I can't like watch this, why this is bothering me, but I'm still going to sit through it, then my job is done. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm done.
I'm gonna
Well, I
end with the story. Oh,
Mission
go ahead,
accomplished.
then. Sue.
no, I just wanted to say that there's a similar story, actually a very like story for me. I don't have problems with it, as Vern says, but I think there are many, many, many humans that have that problem. I grew up in a very strict household with my father was a pastor, so at some point to watch films like that or to read books based on things like that was and the films show very clearly how strongly the Sinti Roma are trying to protect themselves through their belief in what they believe in. I mean that is a very very strong aspect of growing up in a certain religion.
And Sheila, I would also point out that you, because of your upbringing, are rather new to cinema,
Correct.
and
Correct.
so a lot of your reflections and why I think sometimes you underrate your contribution to this panel is where something we have seen 100 times, and you sometimes can see it for the first time, and we can get a view of it that reminds us, oh, wait, yes, that was exciting. And it reminds us why we love films in the first place. You know,
And you, we love you.
well, that goes without saying. Who doesn't love Seal?
I'm turning pale already.
We turned a black man white. Anyway, um, I'm gonna end with the story of the first time I saw this film. I mentioned on my very first date ever. I had failed my driver's exam that morning. And the whole plan was that I was going to pass my driver's exam and pick up her name was Wendy for our first date. And my father said, "Well, you've got your driver's permit, so why don't you pretend like you have to drop me off at home, like you picked me up from work to borrow the car, and then you can drive with her in the car because she was 18 and my driver's permit at 16 would allow me to drive with an 18 or over in the car." And he lied and he covered for me, and then walked all the way back to her house, waited until she was inside and the lights were out, got in the car, and allowed me to drive back. I don't know where this story is going, except I lost my father in 2004, and God, I miss him. But it does lead us
And he was definitely
into
not a pastor.
God, no.
My a pastor would never lie like that.
I can remember when I was 14 years old, my father coming to me and saying, "Listen, I have a confession to make. We made God up just like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. I'm sorry. We just wanted you to behave." But anyway, um, I do want to. I did want to kind of segue this into our promo for next week's episode. Next week, we are going to be discussing the role of sex in European films in uh, our, as cinephiles, relationship to sex in the real world. It is called How European Cinema Shaped My Sex Life. I jokingly said this was a response to the trolls who keep asking, "Well, does knowing all of this stuff ever get you laid?" And the answer is, by the way, yes. So tune in next week. We're going to be talking everything Godard through Faux. Um, uh, Sophia Loren is going to make make another appearance. We
Gina Lulu Brigida.
Gina Brigida is going to make another appearance. Catherine Deneuve is going to make another appearance. Actually, vampire lesbian vampires are going to make another appearance. Two of my favorite episodes that we did are going to be on that. Um, and
Bergman is
we're
going to be very important. Bergman, don't forget Bergman.
absolutely, absolutely, yes, yes. Especially Persona, but Passion of Anna. I mean, yes, we have. Um, enough material probably for 3 episodes prepared just between Yazzie and me, and that's not even including what everyone else contributes. And um, a warning: we're going to use more explicit language than we normally do in next week's episode, so this will be our only explicit rated podcast on the show. But it's also going to be a lot of fun. So join us next week. We'll be recording here at Clubhouse at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, and the podcast will be released at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time the following Tuesday. Other than that, unless anybody has anything else, I'm
Yes,
going to
Sila had
uh,
something.
go
Uh,
ahead.
about the sex episode, can we talk about Nosferatu a little bit again?
Oh, absolutely. But I still suggest that we postpone it to two
I
weeks
was
because
kidding. I was
it,
kidding.
yeah, no, but it's 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. No, look, that John Landis actually says that when vampires bite, women soon. So yeah, that this vampire has, I said it at the beginning, has always been this avatar for eroticism and sexuality and everything. So yeah, of course we can talk about it. But something that I forgot to mention uh, is that this aspect that you said, Sila, about welcoming, like she invited him, this aspect, this linguistic kind of aspect of vampire, that we invite them in, they should always be invited. And that is also another thing that if someone want, because that we arrive to the end of this episode, that is something that, like, for the listener or for everyone to go reflect on, is this aspect of inviting this monster of sort, whether it is a Herzog of a very, isolated, depressed vampire, or very sexual like Eggers. So
Yes, as Vern just pointed out, he's on his 4th hour of therapy here. Don't worry, we're not going to charge you overtime, Vern, but our bill will be in the mail. Anybody got anything else, or can we close